Hey guys, welcome back to It's Just Complicated. On today's episode, we welcome Marissa, a licensed associate professional counselor with more than 2 years of experience in the mental health field. She finds meaning in helping adolescents and adults discover their truest potential. Marissa also completed her master's degrees in art therapy and counseling, which we'll talk about more in detail on this episode. At the end of the day, everyone deserves to feel safe and that they belong in this world. So, tune in today's episode as we discuss our experiences with therapy and the stigma that it faces and so much more.
So on today's episode, we have a very special guest with us, someone that Michelle and I actually went to high school with, and we've been in contact ever since, and her name is Marissa Ferrao. But we're going to call her Missy for the podcast because that's what we've been calling her our whole lives. And so Missy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came into doing what you do?
Sure. So I also want to say I knew Michelle since elementary.
Yeah,
school.
a lot longer than you. I was like, yeah, it sounds like
She did Michelle first.
But I like many of you or all of you. I'm also from Bridgeport, Connecticut. Born and raised. I still live there. I went to UConn for my bachelor's in psychology, and then I worked at UConn Stanford for like almost 6 years, just doing a bunch of different administrative support roles and kind of easing my way into different counseling positions over there. So I did a lot of like academic counseling support positions, and then by the time I was kind of ending my journey with UConn Stanford, I was in the Mental Health Resource Center as just like their administrative staff member. And aside from that, I actually taught freshman seminars over there. And those were really fun because I think those kind of helped build my facilitation skills and my ability to actually like talk about things with clients and stuff. And while I was working at UConn Stanford, I was feeling like I wanted to go to grad school. And initially I thought I just wanted to be an academic counselor. But then I started looking into mental health because so many students were coming to me for like mental health support. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of out of my scope right now. Maybe I should look into a mental health grad program. So I started doing that. I started applying to a couple of programs, and I couldn't bring myself to press submit because I felt like something was missing. I'm like, no, I'm missing something. Like there's something that I'm missing here in this environment, and there's something that I feel like I'm going to continue missing if I don't figure it out. So I actually went to UConn stores to visit some of my like old advisors, and one of them, her daughter was actually in an art therapy program. And she remembered that I made artwork to like kind of say my farewells when I graduated. And she was like, don't you like art? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, well, you seem pretty good at it. Why don't you consider art therapy? And I'm like, oh, what is that? Like, I never heard of that because most people misunderstand art therapy and just kind of see it as, oh, you just like color and it feels good. And so I didn't know that there was an actual field for it. And so I went home that day and I looked for programs, and it was like immediately I was like, yes, this is the type of program I want to go into. So I applied to just 2 programs, one in Connecticut and one out of state. And I couldn't apply that day, obviously. I was missing all my art studio credits. So I had to like go back to school, went to Housatonic, got all my art credits there, and then started applying to the grad programs. And I got into both of them, but I'm so glad I made the decision I made in staying in Connecticut because that was more like a financial thing. I was just like, why bother paying for housing when I could stay with my parents throughout grad school? And so I stayed in Connecticut. So all I had to do was worry about commute. And, COVID started the second semester of my grad program. So I think it was just a really great decision to stay home and have that support there. And then my cohort, I mean, they are all like my best friends now. So that's a plus side.
And they're all near.
Yep, they're all in Connecticut. And we were a very small cohort. I think 9 of us officially who entered together, and then 2 of them were part-timers who were like, they entered before us, but they graduated with us. So officially like 11 of us total.
When did you graduate?
This past May.
Oh, congrats.
2022.
Congrats.
Yeah. So it's honestly, it's really wild to me how much has happened in the past few months. But yeah, that's how I got into art therapy, was basically I felt like something was missing. It was the creativity in kind of approaching counseling like issues. And then I found that program was like perfect. This is for me. And that's kind of how it happened.
So what are you doing now? What's the current role?
My current role is like officially I am a resident counselor. So I am considered a therapist. And I work for it's kind of like a franchise private practice. So they're called ThriveWorks, and they're all over the country. And the one I work for is New Haven. So I do both hybrid and in-person sessions for both individual and couples therapy.
Cool.
Yeah.
How's that been?
It's been awesome. I know like I like to share little snippets of like what I'm learning and sort of experiencing with the clients that I work with.
On her social media, which we'll tag on in our the end here and the notes.
Yeah, and I like to share those things because well, the main reason was that I wanted to be able to look back eventually and see kind of my progress as the therapist, because I've always kind of been in that mode of like the imposter syndrome, where I'm not sure if I'm doing it right or like if I belong in this position, like those types of thoughts. So that's kind of a way for me to overcome that aspect of it, because I'm keeping tabs on how I'm improving over time.
Can I ask something in regards to just how it works in the privacy of it? Because if you do watch her on social media, she's not really sharing names or anything like that. She's just sharing her experiences, I think, as a therapist. Mm-hmm. But can you just share a little bit about like just the privacy of what it is as a therapist?
Yes. So yeah, ethically, we are bound by HIPAA. Legally, I should say, not ethically, because there's a difference, but legally bound by HIPAA. So I will not share any identifiable information. And that includes like, people might think that's just your name and your birthday and stuff like that, but that includes what kind of job they might hold, where they live, things like that. So I will not share anything about my clients, more so just an overall blanket statement of, oh, I'm working with clients who deal with anxiety, or I'm working with couples who are dealing with communication issues. And this is kind of how I've been approaching things, or this is something that happened in therapy that I've really learned something valuable from. So very much just very vague things. And this is kind of what we're trained to do in school anyways, when we do like not case studies, like case presentations, so that we're not giving identifiable information. Yeah.
Cool. You're hearing all these problems from all these people, things they have to deal with. How is that for you on a personal note? Like once you leave your job, how do you feel outside those doors? And then do you go to therapy? Mm-hmm. Double.
Yes, I go to therapy, but aside from that, when we were in training, like my cohort and I, a lot of it comes with how are you processing your own stuff once the session's over, or even before the session, so you're not bringing your own stuff into the session. So part of that, I will say, because of like the art therapy side, art is very important for us with that aspect, to help kind of ground us before or after a particularly difficult session. But aside from that, my workday consists of just counseling. Like there's the notes are tied into my pay for the counseling session. So it's primarily just back to back. I'm in meetings, and it's really important to tie in like certain breaks and stuff like that in between clients so that we have time to like use the bathroom or feed ourselves. But also just to take that breath, because I even had a client the other day who it finally dawned on her that I see people back to back. And she was like, how do you do that? Like, how do you shift gears so quickly? And I'm like, well, I guess because I see everyone as so different, and they're all dealing with something very unique, even if it's kind of an issue that we can all relate to in some capacity. And so what I'm talking about with them in their session, I'm like all in. And then once it's over, it's like a switch goes off, and I'm like, okay, now I'm moving to this person who's dealing with this, and now I'm all in here. And so I don't really know how to explain that feeling, but it's more about I'm just fully present. And then when I end my day, for the most part, or if I have a nice long break in between clients, it depends on what my body needs in that moment. Usually if I'm kind of high spirits, like just going throughout my day, I might just be chatty and want to talk to, like, if there's a coworker around.
Can we talk?
Yeah.
Can
I just talk to you? Like, it doesn't have to be about anything related. It's just, let me talk to you. And then other times, if I'm working from home, I might talk to my home coworker, Vincent, and just like just kill time. But yeah, most of the time, if I'm recognizing that a session really took a lot out of me, I'm gonna take a break and either like lay down on the couch,
Fair,
or just that's it. Like, I'm just gonna sit there.
So is there any time that you don't want to see people, that you don't want to talk to anyone?
I would say, like, sure, there might be times where I'm like, oh God, I don't want to go to work. But usually when I get there,
I think that's normal for everyone.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, but I think in her field, it's kind of like I work in an office where I'm just sitting there with, I don't really have to talk to anyone if I don't want to, but she has to talk to people. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, am I in the mood to talk to people?
Yeah, so that's another important thing to recognize. Anyone in a helping profession, but especially in this case with like a therapist, being attuned to your own needs, being able to recognize what you are dealing with, or being able to check in with yourself, so that, again, it's about like not bringing your stuff fully into the session. Yeah, you might be able to relate to things that your clients are talking about, but if it's triggering you as the clinician too much, that might impact the session or the therapeutic relationship. So if I feel like I don't want to talk to someone, I haven't gotten to the point where like I felt so strongly that I don't want to talk to someone that I need to cancel. But if it ever got to that point, then I would have to be aware of maybe I should take this time to myself. Like, maybe I should cancel this session because I'm not in a good space. Other than that, if I am feeling just a little bit overwhelmed, I might really try to gear the direction of the session for the client to just keep talking to me and be like the listener.
Let it out.
Yeah,
this is one of those.
Just let it out. Tell me more about this. That way I'm not sitting there like waiting to get something in. It's more so just I'm sitting here present. I need to listen to you and hear what you have to say so that we can maybe work from there.
Okay, cool. I want to just bring the girls into this a little bit and ask what are your experiences with therapy? So Jackie, Dunny, Michelle, and me. I'll share too at the end. I'll be the last one. But do you guys go to therapy? Do you guys enjoy going to therapy? Do you guys not go to therapy? So who wants to go first?
This is why you guys wanted me here, huh? I do therapy. 100%.
Like
Um,
actively?
I have phases where I'm like, if I don't identify with somebody, I think that's what she was just talking about before I walked in, about, you know, if you're not in the mental space, because sometimes like it's so hard to find a therapist that you connect with, and you say like, okay, there's a part of us that looks for like something relatable, right? So I've had therapists in the past that like don't have kids, aren't married, and I'm like, but these are like my issues. How can I rely on somebody to treat me and help me with these things if you've never gone through it? Like, I get it, you went to school and like, so you know what I'm saying?
Yep, that's a really real concern that comes up a lot, like with a lot of clients.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
especially that particular topic.
So like I've been bouncing back and forth until like I finally found someone. My mother-in-law was like, hey, there's this lady, and I was like, okay, let's give it a try. And like, she's married and she has kids, and she's like really soft-spoken, and like it's amazing. But I have phases. There's like phases of me that like I'll go to therapy and I'm like, this is helping me. And then there's phases that I'm like, okay, this is just not helping me. Like, let me take a break and figure out, like, do I journal?
Mm-hmm.
Do I, you know, go on hikes? Like, I don't, but like, it's an example.
It's a thought that I have in my head.
I weigh my options, and I just end up going back to therapy. But I
Yeah.
do journal a lot, so.
Well, that's good that you have an understanding of, okay, if I'm not going to be going to therapy, then what else am I going to be doing to keep myself kind of,
Have to do something.
yeah.
Right. So yeah, I love therapy, guys.
Michelle or Dunny, who's next?
So I recently, this hasn't even been a full year yet that I've started therapy after years of Fernanda saying to me, I think you should go to therapy. Which before I didn't think I need therapy, right? And I mentioned this to her. It's kind of like, you know that there's something there that you need to talk about, but you don't think it's the extent of you sitting there and talking to a complete stranger. Mm-hmm. Although I'm very talkative, it's weird to share my personal life to someone that I really don't know. So I found a therapist that we clicked right away. I've been doing therapy with her, I'm going to say for what,
6 months?
6 months now. And I finally have reached the point where I go into therapy without knowing what to talk about. Because now I'm like, okay, you helped me figure out all of the big issues in my life. What are we going to talk about now? So I continue to do therapy because every time I go into the session, she brings something out of me that she's like, all right, let's talk about this then.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's an issue. You're right.
You're right.
So now I recommend therapy to everybody because I'm like, even when you think you're in a good space, there's always something you can work on to
Yes.
make you feel a little better.
I can relate to that myself. Like I said, I'm in therapy too. I've been in therapy with the same therapist.
No way.
For
I always wondered if therapists need therapy.
I like highly encourage, if anyone's gonna be a therapist, I'm a big advocate for you should probably have one yourself.
Yeah.
Obviously not everyone might feel the same, but I've been with my therapist since 2017, so over 5 years. It's gonna be 6
Are
years.
you loyal?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. She's loyal too.
I don't think I could ever, but
You could.
I mean, no.
You found when
We'll
you find the
see.
right person,
We'll see.
you commit.
Yeah, no, honestly. And when I say loyal, like my insurance probably changed like 4 times in the past 6 years. And there
She
was
did the work.
there was a time where she didn't even take my insurance, and I was like, nope, I'm gonna figure this out. Like I'm staying with you. So no, but what was I saying about what I
That
relate
you
to?
do therapy yourself and you can relate to sometimes I don't need therapy now. I'm
Oh
good.
yes. Oh yeah. So again, being in therapy for almost 6 years now,
Consistently.
consistently.
Okay.
Yes, I won't bring
Thanks,
that
Fernanda.
in.
I got it.
I won't bring that in, but I don't ghost my therapist.
We'll talk about
We'll
that.
talk about that when it's Fernanda's turn.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of like that trajectory of the therapeutic, like the healing journey. So I started off weekly for like 8 months. And then once I was ready, it went to biweekly. And then it started being like, okay, let's do every 3 weeks, every month. And then for a while, I think it was almost every 6 weeks or 2 months. And then it was one of those moments where I'm like, ooh, I think I need you again, like consistently. Probably when I was in grad school, because that was a hard time. And so we stayed consistent probably since around that time, like 2020. And most recently, I finally got to the point where I was like, I wasn't looking forward to this session because I didn't feel like I had enough to talk about. So I think we can start putting that gap of time in again. And that's fine. It's just being aware of that. And also being able as the client to say like, hey, can we review my treatment plan? Have I met the goals that we like agreed upon at the start of therapy? And is there something else we can maybe talk about working towards at this point?
That's awesome. I was going to ask a question, but then you brought up the review points, and then I started thinking about how Dani told me that I shouldn't go to my therapist. I should ask about the review. And to me, so I wanted to share last, but I'll quickly go. For me, I've had therapists on and off my whole life. So I remembered, I'm going to ask you now. But because I also have those moments in my life where I'm like, oh, I need therapy. Like, I can tell. So my question to you was going to be, for you, what does that look like? I think I need a little more, like I need you right now, versus like we need, other than not having, because I can see when you don't have enough to talk about on those weekly sessions, that makes sense, let's gap it out. But when you're gapped out, how do you know, for you, I know everyone's different, but how do you know, oh, I need this, like it's time for me to get back on weekly with my therapist?
Yeah. So I think like knowing who you are as a person, I think you might be able to relate, but I mean, my therapist recognizes this as well. I'm a very intuitive person, and I'm very in tune with my body and my body's needs. So that's part of it, is that once I start to recognize, okay, something's off, I probably need more support somewhere.
Right. Like I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
For me, it's like I'm not sleeping well anymore. Like I'm waking up in the middle of the night with anxiety. Like I wake up my days and I feel anxious. You're right. Because that is how I feel. When I start feeling those ways, where I start feeling my body a little like almost like out of breath,
Yep.
That's when I'm like, oh, I need some support.
But see, that's the self-awareness, right? And I just wanted to say this because I've been like thinking about it. And when Dani started therapy, she said something like, I think it was you. She said that the important part of therapy is even those days that you don't think you have nothing to talk about, right? Let's say you go into therapy and you're like, I don't really have anything to talk about today. My day was fine. Just on the way here, there was this asshole, and like I was beeping at him, and I was like, fuck you, and you were road raging, right? And then your therapist is like, okay, so let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? And then you're like, oh, so I do have something to talk about. Like, why am I so angry when I drive? I'm an angry driver.
Yeah. I am too. Well, I have been. Done better.
I've been trying since I had my son, but like,
That's so. When I have my daughter,
Yeah.
I'm like,
because
she's watching me. I can't
not
do this.
even when he's not in the car. Like, I'm like, okay, like I have two options. One, I could be angry and I could beep and curse this person out and have to like now drive an extra 2 miles so I can get him to stop following me, or I can just put my poker face on and go about my day. I usually choose the beeping, but
She knows her options. This is so important.
but I've been trying to not have road rage.
That's so funny.
That's just it's interesting. I think you said that.
Yeah, because before, like I said, I didn't think I needed therapy.
Yeah.
But I've always had the anxiety, the feeling of like, I'm not doing enough. What is it? Like, I've always been this person where I want to do everything. And now with kids, I realize that I can't do everything. I don't have enough time in my day. I don't have enough energy anymore. So I started to feel like I was letting myself down too much, but yet like I have a good career, I have a good relationship, I'm a good mother. Like, what is it that's missing?
Yeah.
And I felt like I wasn't good enough for any of it at the same time. So when I go into therapy and I talk to her and she like asks me like simple questions and I'm like, oh, it's deeper than what I'm thinking. And now I realize like you need that. You need somebody to kind of poke at you and the places that you don't realize that is your issue.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a question really about that. Don't you think that sometimes that can be like you as a therapist, right? I imagine it's hard for you to even know, because everybody's different. Some people need a more like aggressive approach, and then some people need a more like soft spoken, and like, how do you, because I feel like that is denial, like, oh, you know, I'm right, like I'm okay, and like when you're in therapy, I'm trying to like put
How do you make them realize that they need help?
Right, but in a way that like
Helps.
hey asshole, wake up, like your life is upside down, versus like, okay, let's break it down. Generational traumas, and like, because when I sit in therapy, she goes through, I'm like, why are you asking me these questions? Like, I had a dog, sure, he died like 10 years ago, okay, what does that have to do? And then she's like, I'm gonna explain it later on, just do the homework,
Patience.
sit down, shut up, let me
She didn't really say that, but
no, but I'm sure I talk a lot, so she's probably like, oh my god, what did I get myself into?
I'm sure there are some thoughts. I have those thoughts sometimes.
See, I'm like, and then I look at her and I'm like, you need to tell me if I'm like, she's like, no, you're here to talk. Go ahead. And,
Exactly.
but yeah, how do you approach, like, how many sessions deep end do you say, like, okay, this is the approach I take with this person?
Yes. Okay. Well, part of that obviously is gonna go with training. Like I will highly speak of my program. I was trained so well with my school, like the professors and faculty, and then my internship experiences really prepared me. But the other thing about it is that I do recognize that my position as a client impacts my position as a therapist.
Right.
And that I'm such an active client. I pick up on how my own therapist has gotten me to you know, out of that denial.
The process, yeah.
Out of that denial, and kind of like, oh,
I got work to do.
we have stuff to talk about. So, you know, that happens. And so I've picked up on like how she's kind of approached me in that way. And yeah, I absolutely, I tell her too sometimes. I'm like, I kind of, what do you call it? Like,
impersonated you.
Not yet, but there's like, I don't even know the word for it. I channeled my like, my inner, her name's Rachel. I channeled my inner Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
And so there's that. And then a lot of my colleagues, they also go to therapy, which I'm really happy about that. I share that with so many
common ground.
Other therapists. Yeah. And so I feel like they can kind of probably relate to that idea of, as an active client, you kind of start to pick up on, oh, well, I've been in that place before. I've been in denial before. This is how I probably would have benefited or did benefit from someone approaching it with me. Let me try that. So I think a lot of times it is trial and error. But then the other side of that, again, is the training. So understanding the different theories of counseling,
right,
and maybe, you know, what model might work in a certain situation. Because one model is not going to be the same for all sessions, and it's not going to be the same for every client.
Right, because everyone's different and everyone works in different.
Yeah, and we, like, as individuals, we're going to need different approaches. Like,
right,
we can't just stay in one approach the whole time, unless that's what you want as a client, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Michelle, have you been to therapy before? And how do you feel about it?
I am my own therapist.
That's what they all say.
Well, but I'm different. No, I never said I don't need therapy because I am my own therapist.
She's like me. She knows her options. She just
So-
chooses them.
Yeah.
So you haven't been to therapy before?
No, I've never been to therapy, but I teach a lot about social emotional to my students. No, it's okay. It's always Michelle. Yeah, I don't go to therapy. There really isn't a reason why I don't go to therapy.
And that's okay.
Do you think about going to
maybe
therapy?
I think about it because I do deal with over 150 emotions a day. So I do think about it, but then I have throughout the years figured out ways to kind of break away. Like Missy had mentioned, I was like, oh, we're really similar because, I'm dealing with like 30 students for an hour. Each hour is 30 new students. So it's just kind of like I'm here, present, and then next 30 kids go completely hold different lesson, right? Because it's a different
Completely
grade.
different group.
And you just have to shut it off. Like we're here for an hour. All right, cool. Shut off. Next, shut off. Oh, let me see a coworker. If I see a coworker in the hallway, I want to like laugh and giggle. I don't want to talk about work. So that's my like, ooh, shut off moment kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right, back to work.
It's healthy compartmentalization.
Yes. So look at that. I am my own
Maybe she
therapist.
is. Maybe she be a
You guys don't
therapist.
understand.
So do you ever
Teachers
shut?
are
do
like
you
that.
ever?
Kind of is all of our therapists. So
When do you shut
Oh my
back
God,
on?
That's true.
When do you
Turn back on.
turn back on?
Turn back on as in
Like, because you're always you shut. Like when you're in your class, you're like, okay, shut the emotions down. Be here. Next class with your coworkers. Like you're always just kind of like, okay, let's just be here. And then
But-
you get home and you got your kids. All right, I know how that goes. You got to shut it off. Be here with your kids.
organization.
You're with your husband. When do you not
Sit with
shut
your
it off?
own stuff.
Yeah. When do you sit with your own
When do you
stuff?
have
When I'm by
time for
myself.
yourself? That's pretty much with your.
When my students get
thoughts.
dismissed, I have like an hour and a half. And that's just my me moment. Once my kids go to sleep, that's my me moment for a little bit, and then it's my husband. But I every
When he
single
goes to sleep,
day,
that's me.
every single day, once my students are
Sorry.
dismissed, that's my moment to reflect on my day, how I want to approach the rest of my day, what are my goals for the next day, if I need to update any to-dos for the following week. Like that's just my moment to sit in silence and reflect on how I can do things differently.
Do
Cool.
you? No, go ahead.
No, go.
I just when you guys say like shut off, I get like we're talking the feelings aspect of like it's not about me, it's about. Do you ever feel like even when you're just at home and like, because I can't imagine being a teacher like Michelle. I don't know how you do it. I just want to say that like with 2 kids in a house, and I kind of get why you don't do therapy. You don't have time.
Awesome.
You should, but
You should. Ha ha ha.
sorry.
We all should.
I
we all
think
should.
everybody should do therapy. Like you don't. Yeah.
I know you like. I know, guys. Michelle's a really big content. I admire you. You're good with the digital and like even TikToks. Like she keeps our stuff alive. But I think that's what you do on your free time. What do you do for like? How? Because I can't imagine somebody who doesn't have like I go to therapy and I cry the whole hour. And
I'll cry.
My therapist is like, okay,
I just don't cry with the therapist.
Right.
our session is almost over, and she's just pulling out the things like this, and she's
Just
just
like, all right, hurry up.
I think what Jackie's trying to ask is how do you process your own feelings?
yes, how without a guidance, because it doesn't necessarily have to be therapist. Some people have someone they rely on. Some people have things they do. All I see Michelle do is she's very present with her family, and she's very good at her job. And I mean, you have us, but how do you do you?
It's my hour and a half daily. Sit in silence
And that's
and
what,
reflect and just feel what I got to feel because I had to turn it off throughout the entire day. Because from 7 o'clock to 3:45, it was all about different students every hour of the day. Like I have to deal with kids having panic attacks, right? And like who's gonna deal with that? And I get a lot of the, I often get this. Well, from our social worker last year, she came up to me. She's like, I don't get it. You talk a lot about social emotional. You do social emotional with every single one of your classes, but like you don't have much grace with yourself. And I was that sometimes. She was like, you don't allow yourself to just make mistakes, but you teach everybody else like it's okay to make mistakes and you push it for kids and you work with. And I was like, yeah, I mean that happens. That's probably like a good. But then I do
that with my hour and a half. comes.
at my 3:45 time, I'll deal with that in the moment. But no, I do think everyone needs therapy, including myself. But I think that a lot of the things that I use, the techniques I use, because I want to teach my scholars, I use it for myself. So during that 1 hour and a half, like, mistakes are okay. Today's a new day with a new opportunity.
It's a bad day.
You know what I mean?
Life.
Right. And so all of these things that I research and I try to figure out so I can support my scholars, like, I take it for myself as well. And it's not a reason to not go to therapy just because, like, I know of these resources and I know of these, like, coping skills, but it's been working in some way.
I just want you to know too
But-
that you don't go to therapy and you're great because you're like really well put together and calm. Like yesterday I had a whole meltdown and she's like pushes me aside. Okay, let's take a deep breath. I said, yo, I am literally gonna.
Yeah, she was like, she was about to throw hands party. I was like, I'm just trying to help
Christmas
you.
party.
I didn't want to cry. The gingerbreads were like houses
She's
were
like
like falling
flash all the
apart.
houses.
She was like, if you don't get out of my way, I'm gonna cry. I was like, so cry. But you're still wrong.
She stood in the front of the door and she's like, I got this.
Yeah.
You could cry. So I just think that you do pretty great without therapy. I mean, I don't think therapy is for everybody, but people like Michelle, like I don't know anybody, like I don't have friends, but my family wise, like you're very well put together with no therapy.
Yeah, what I hear is that Michelle is a very well-adjusted person.
She is.
Yeah.
She's so in control of her emotions. And I'm like, how do you do this?
Yeah.
How?
I think it's also a little bit of my background in education and development and stuff like that.
Well, you've
too.
always been like this since we were kids. You're.
Was I? I don't remember.
I don't remember all of that, but you are great right now.
That's when I need a therapist to remember all of that.
I do have a question for Mitzi as a therapist. When you get clients like Michelle that think they're enough, how do you deal?
That think they are perfect.
Right. Well, not that it's a bad thing. I think she's awesome. Yes, she's put together. But I'm saying, like, when you get a client, let's say,
Does that even?
or a couples therapy, for example, let's say, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be them by themselves. But if you get a wife and a husband and one of them are like, I'm good, like, why are we here?
Right.
And the other one is like,
That's not my mindset, though.
no, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that it doesn't have to be the person by itself. Because
Somebody who
obviously
doesn't.
someone like Michelle would be like, I don't need to go to therapy. But her husband could be like, we need to go to therapy. We need to talk about this. How do you deal with, like, changing that key to say, you're here for a greater reason, a different reason. Yeah, you're great for yourself, but let's talk about where we can improve.
Yeah, well, I love clients like that because that's like
challenge.
That is not me.
no, yeah.
Stop pointing to me, all right? I never. It's like I think that, like, oftentimes when someone says, and I think specifically me, when I say I don't go to therapy, people have this misconception that I don't believe in therapy, and it's like that's not true, and it's not because I don't have time. It's just not a thought in my head. Just because of the research. Like, for example, like, my husband won't go to therapy, right? And so what do? Well, we need to work on communication skills. So I will be our therapist. And I will see, and and I tell the girls all the time, like, I sit and I listen and I see both perspectives. Obviously with my husband, it's a little different because, that's my husband. Listen, it's my way or the highway.
But they are all like
when
that.
when it's time to communicate and work together, I'm like, okay, I'm a little more open to seeing your side too. But it's like, it's not necessarily that I don't think I need to be in therapy. I won't go to therapy. Like, let's say my husband's like, I want to go to therapy. I won't sit there and be like, I'm too good for this.
Okay, so not comparing Michelle to your client, but your client.
Yes. I have two things. To answer Dunny's question, it was like, again, I like those clients. And it's not just because they're a little bit of a challenge, but because I see myself in them a little bit. And because I was the person who didn't think I needed therapy before I started therapy. And even as someone who studied psychology in undergrad, I didn't even know I was dealing with anxiety all my life. I didn't know I lived through childhood trauma until I was in my 20s and started therapy. So I see myself in some of those clients and I'm like, ooh, I got you. Like
Relatable.
we're gonna be going somewhere. And so a lot of times I will pick up on that one little thing, that one little detail. Michelle, not to pick on you, but just like your one thing where you said the social worker will say, you know, you do all this for others, but you don't really have enough grace for yourself. Same. I've lived that. I still live that to some extent. And so where does that come from? You know, that's what I will explore with them. And for me, I'm just going to say for me, it was about being the perfectionist. Which again stemmed from a lot of childhood trauma. But yeah, so like pick up on those really tiny details where they're like, I'm all good, but, and then it's like, well, what's that but right there? What is that? And where does that come from? Let's explore that more. And then it gets to a point where they're like, oh my God, like there's so much.
That was literally me in therapy. Because when Fernanda used to say to me, you need to go to therapy, I'm like, sorry, Fernanda. Like, you got issues. I'm perfect. I'm like, okay. But when I went to therapy.
She did that to me too.
When I went to therapy, it literally was like that little thing that she picked on that makes you realize, like, oh, I do have. It's not. I don't want to say it's an issue because I don't want to make it seem like who's going to therapy. And that's, I think, a misconception of people that go to therapy, that you have an issue, that you're crazy, that you're this and you're that. It's not. The anxiety is something that I used to deal with when I was younger. The girls remember. I used to literally have anxiety to the point of throwing up because it was that bad. Like my body would feel that emotion.
Yeah.
And that's something that I didn't know back then, but I could have worked through therapy with that. I didn't have to take meds. So I went to the doctors and they were like, oh, here, take this for your anxiety every time you feel like that. And I could have just worked my emotions. I didn't have to take pills for it.
Not that pills are necessarily, I'm a big believer in pills regulating chemicals that we do not know anything about. You don't, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not on pills right now, but there's times of my life that I'm like, I need to go on pills.
I am on pills.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a therapist and as a client, I take antidepressants every day. And I also take an oral contraceptive to control my menstrual cycles.
The hormones.
Yeah, the hormones.
Oh my God.
But
They really impact me.
That all was, you went through a whole process of figuring out what worked for you, right? You didn't go to your primary doctor and the primary doctor said to you,
and I wouldn't I personally wouldn't have trusted getting diagnosed.
Right, but I was 19 at the time. So
Yeah.
at 19, do I know better? No, I went to my doctor and my doctor said, oh, here's whatever.
Yeah.
So I think there's a process. You go to therapy.
Yeah. I found a psychiatrist.
You find a psychiatrist and you figure out what is it that works for you. And now, yes, you're on medication, but it's the correct medication.
I agree. I'm very passionate about therapy. And I'm also passionate about healthy eating and taking care of your body and taking care of yourself. And it sometimes comes across as I'm anti-medication. And that's not true. I'm not anti-medication. I respect it. I think it's beautiful what science has done for us humans and how long we live because of medication. And I love that you mentioned and share that you're on medication, but you also share that you've been on therapy for 6 years because you've been doing the work.
And medication's
it's like,
new.
Yes, you've been doing the work and you come to a place where it's like, I've done the work, I'm taking care of myself, I'm doing all that I can do, and it seems like it's chemical imbalances, and that makes sense, and that's cool. What hurts me seeing in our society is I go to the doctors, I have this pain here, whether it's physical or mental, I have this pain, and the doctor's like, cool, here's some medication. Like my dad had sciatica, where he had like a nerve, and I'm like, let's stretch, let's do some yoga, let's
Physical therapy.
He's like, no, they give me medicine, I'm good. And I'm like, and that was his, and I literally every night was like, did you stretch today? He's like, yeah, like a few minutes, but I take the medicine, I feel fine. And what am I gonna do? Do you people, you want to take medication? But like, for me, it's like, can we try to do it without the medication? And if like after a week or two, it's still really painful, cool, let's take the medication. And so.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, I understand that now because I have not taken pills in the last year, and my emotion regulation is all coming within myself. I think, I give myself credit, I think I've been doing so much better with just like, even like I'm very aggressive and like, yeah, I'm really quick to like explode and then it just blacks out. I haven't had an episode.
She's been graying out.
Yeah. I'm 25. My frontal lobe is like fully developed. They keep making fun of me because they're like, our frontal lobe only develops once we're 25.
We keep pushing it every year for her. So like
Yeah.
at
Like,
first
it's
we were like
26.
23. And she turns 23. Okay, 24. Okay, 25. We're still going. We'll figure it out. I know there's science, but with Jackie it's a little different.
But yeah, I think Fernanda's, I see it now because pills do have side effects as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And I remember feeling like, yeah, I'm happier, but I'm also miserable because I am so tired. And like, I'm going to the bathroom 5 times a day. And at night, I can't sleep because I'm so I'm like folding my clothes at 2 a.m. My husband wakes up and he's like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm
You're like, I'm busy.
I have energy. Woohoo. And it's just like,
Yeah.
and then the next day you wake up because you sleep 4 hours and you're like, okay, well, I'm okay, but I'm so tired because you have too much energy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, I definitely, I just wanted to talk to Fernanda's point about, I never didn't respect or like advocate for medication for people who need it. But for years, I was like, no, I don't need medication. I just need to talk about things. And there was also a stigma tied to that, just,
There still is.
cultural and family and like just that stigma that I was living in, where it was mostly shame. Like
Right.
if I need medication, then I've lost like something.
There's something wrong with you.
Yeah. And
okay, I'm gonna use the word. People will call you crazy. Like,
well, yeah, I mean that was also part of the fear. It's just like, oh, well, why do you need medication? You're not like other people. And it's like, well, I don't see other people as bad if they need medication.
Right.
So why would I see myself as that? So it did take me, this year was when I started medication. It took me almost 6 years of therapy to finally come to terms with, okay, maybe there's a chemical issue here. Like, I've done so much work and I am miserable still.
exhausted.
Yeah, so I'm like, let's find a psychiatrist, and we've done so well with finding like the right dosage and stuff. Like right now, I think I'm good. I think I'm good at where we're at.
Oh my god.
Cool.
The
Yeah.
dosage. Yeah.
I think the fact that you've been going to therapy for 6 years is helpful because you're working with people that now know you for 6 years.
That's awesome.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like just I mean with the medication, I think that's the hardest part for me, and I think people can relate. It's adjusting the dosage. Like
Yeah.
20 milligrams, 30, 50. There was at one point I was at 200.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, this is crazy. Like, I'm not hungry. I my stomach hurts. I'm nauseous. I thought I was pregnant even because I was like, this is not normal. So I call my psychiatrist, and I would see her once a month for, I think it's the medication management appointment that you go. And I'm like, I'm miserable. Like, and then she's like, you just keep going. Like, you need to give it at least 3 months, 3 to 6 months. And so I gave the 6 months. She's like, okay, maybe if it's still bad, well, so she puts it down to 150. And so that back and forth of like,
Yeah.
it was that whole year.
I can
and
see how you can lose yourself in that.
you
Yeah.
do. And I was like, I can't
That's
do this
difficult.
anymore. Like, I come to my appointments. I am telling you, and this is another thing where like sometimes therapy is like, I'm like, I can't do this because it's my therapist working with my psychiatrist. And it's like this miscommunication. So this is why it's important to find
Good fits.
a right place.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, okay, I'm exhausted. Like, I don't, fuck pills, fuck therapy.
I'm gonna throw hands.
I'm gonna go outside, smoke a cigarette, and go about my day. And so
Yeah.
I took that approach.
That's
and,
tiring.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds.
but like it was like to also my husband. He's like he's like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's try this way now. You've been on pills for all this time. You've been back and forth between therapists. Find yourself. Do something. This is when we started this podcast too, which is funny because I'm like, okay, we have our like, but the adjusting the dosage, I think it's what's most frustrating for people because the second I mention it to a lot of people, like, oh, so but how am I going to find the medication? And then you have to find the right dosage. And then you have to figure out if you're going to have, because some people do have side effects and then some people don't.
Yep.
So I think medication is scary and people have this misconception of like, I'm not going to take pills. It's going to fuck me up, which it kind of does, but it gets worse before it gets better. And that's why they don't do it. And then there's not enough information out there. Like, I'm very passionate about, like, because I am so deep into mental health. And I talk to people and they're like, oh, I'm like, but it's just for anxiety. It doesn't mean you're depressed. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're literally crazy. Like, I've been called crazy so many. Oh, you take pills, you're crazy.
It's the stigma of like the therapy. Like if you go to therapy, there has to be something wrong with you, and it's not. We're humans. We have emotions.
We're complicated.
We're complicated.
It's just complicated.
and that's right. And it's like sometimes you just need to let it out. And one of the things that I mentioned to the girls before in therapy, I get to tell her my side, and she'll just listen to me. And there's not like I feel like
Isn't it nice to be heard?
She's throwing a jab at me.
Yes, it is nice though.
I think you guys need therapy.
But me and Fernanda need therapy for our friendship.
Hey,
no.
Missy's here today.
After this is over.
But no,
There are some ethical boundaries.
Can you be a therapist to friends?
It's family therapy.
Right, but my point is like being able to sit there and let someone listen to you and you tell your side of the story, and then they don't tell you their point of view, right? My therapist doesn't tell me what she thinks. She literally will bring out what I said and throw it at me and say, how do you feel listening to yourself? Mm-hmm. How do you feel like about what you just said, and pick point things instead of like the back and forth of like a friendship, right? Mm-hmm. And that's all it is. It's like, I'm not crazy. I just need to handle my emotions, because at the end of the day, like I am carrying everybody else's emotions around. I'm married. I have kids. Again, like even when I wasn't married and I didn't have kids, I had a sister. I had my parents that I had to deal with. Right. Well, for a long time, I think I was trying to be Jackie's emotional support, that I forgot about supporting my emotions.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes. It's not that we're crazy. I'm not at my house
We're not
acting crazy.
We're not crazy.
But I'm in a room sometimes crying for hours because I just don't know where to channel that emotion.
We're not crazy. We're just mentally unstable. That's my go-to.
That's still
I'm just
stigmatizing it. Like, it's not how many stigma. But no, what I like to say about what I like to say about therapy is it's very normal for us to go to doctors, primary doctors, because we have a pain in our knee, we have a pain in our bodies, we got to check up on ourselves every 6 months. Very normal in society. Therapy for me is a doctor for your mind.
For your
100%.
It's the root of
like,
it all.
There's a doctor for your body, which we are very used to because, of course, we want to keep our body strong. And then there's a therapy for our mind. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's just as important, especially because our mind controls our body. Our mind controls our perception of the world around us. So for me, therapy is huge. And I want to share my experience with therapy because it's my turn to share. No, I know I shared a little bit, but I want to share something specific. So basically, I've been in therapy for big moments of my life. So my transition into college, I went to therapy for a few months. There was a relationship point that I went to therapy for the relationships. So I go to therapy for specific moments in my life that I can't deal with. I got pregnant in college, senior year. That was a lot for me. So I went to therapy. And to touch on Jackie's point, I also had the experience of like, once I had Emily, once I had my daughter, I was young. I was 21.
Yep.
How the hell do I deal with this? And someone mentioned this therapist that I went, she was like young. She was fresh out of college, had just finished Fairfield. And I was telling her stuff, and it just did not feel right at all. Not only did I not feel like you don't understand, but it wasn't a good fit. But that's the thing with when I tell people, what do you think about therapy? Because I do that a lot. I did that for Dunny a lot and my other friends. That when I notice, I'm like, I feel like that's hard to deal with on your own. Like, what do you think about therapy? I worry because I'm like, if they go to the wrong one, this is their first time. And if they go to the wrong one, they might be like, it isn't for me.
Right.
And I'm like, no, just keep looking. It's like a relationship. It's like a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Mm-hmm. Just keep going. And it scares me to.
That's a great point.
So I want to emphasize that like, you got to go therapist shopping.
I have a question for Missy. Do you share anything of your personal life
with my clients?
With your clients?
Yes, actually.
You do?
Hypothetically speaking, or like you say, like
Both.
Yeah.
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, so part of that is, again, it's all about your own personal boundaries. And for me, and I think a lot of therapists can relate to this, for me, I tread lightly enough so that I'm not, giving too much information and turning the session towards me.
About you, right?
Yeah, but I also recognize the benefit of hearing, again, humanizing that experience with the client, and hearing, oh, like even you deal with something like this. So it's, just because it's like, you're not separate from me in that way. Like we're both human, and you're not alone. And so, yeah, hypothetically, sometimes when I'm really treading lightly, and I'm not sure what the benefit of telling them something personal would be, I'll just kind of say like, oh, this is very familiar to me. Or I'll kind of relate it to, oh yeah, I've worked with a lot of people who deal with this. And maybe I haven't. Maybe I've just worked with myself. But you know what? It's just something to, again, kind of tie in that human experience. And then other times, yeah, I'll just straight up tell someone, yeah, I deal with a severe anxiety disorder, or I deal with PTSD. And we'll just, that's
Hit
it.
it off.
It's there. It's out in the open.
Yeah.
So I have a question, because I feel like we, and this is very like specifically for us four, have this issue. I actually have this with other people in my life too, where I think we can all agree, like sometimes they feel like I make things about myself. And I, in my mind, am like, I am attempting to humanize this conversation in a sense of, I can relate to you. It's happened to me too. I get it, right? But then for some people, it comes off across like, oh my God, here she goes. Like I'm talking about myself, and then she's giving an example about herself. How do you have this conversation with someone where you're like, I'm relating to you, but in a standard point of like, I don't want to make it about me, and I don't want to feel like they're, that I'm making about myself. How do I do this like in a way that, because I feel like I do that a lot, and I come across as misunderstood. Like, okay, here she goes, she's making it about herself. But no, really, I relate to you, and I want to help you, and I want to let you know that you're not alone. So how do you like do that with someone, like loved ones? Like, it doesn't matter, because I have a really hard time not making things about myself. And then when I catch myself, I'm like, oh my God, I totally ignored her problem. And here I am talking about a problem I had last month, trying to relate, but then I screwed the conversation up.
Gotcha.
And then they're like, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah. That's a hard one to answer. It's more so because I'm still like in therapy mode.
Yeah.
And I think as a person, like your personality is going to play into it. And so as a person, I am a listener more than a talker.
Okay.
That's always kind of how I've been. But, as a therapist, when I pick up on something like, oh my God, they're going through something so similar. Like, this is like,
Start sweating. You're like,
I can tell them. I can tell them the secrets. But I will just, again, it's about staying like present for them, because this is their time. So even when we're talking to loved ones and they're kind of confiding in you, like remembering that, okay, this is their time. They're looking for support. So just being present and listening, being that listener and playing that active role in listening before having something to say, and kind of just keeping yourself in check there. But obviously that's really hard if your personality is more, I'm a talker.
I am.
So I think, yeah.
I don't know if it's a sibling thing, but right now, me and Fernanda are going through it. And the reason why I said we need therapy is because of that, because she feels like I don't listen to her. I do. I talk a lot.
It's not intentional.
That's just who I am. And even in the moment, I don't even realize that I'm not giving her space. Sometimes I stopped calling. We used to talk every day in the morning, and I stopped calling her because I noticed that when I called, it was more to talk about things, and then it ended up talking about me and my problems and my shit. And then at the end of the conversation, it's like, okay, well, I'll talk to you later. And then I'm like, I don't even know what's going on in Fernanda's life right now.
Yeah.
because I was so focused on like venting to her and talking to her about my shit that I forgot about her.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets to a point when we are talking about our relationship ourselves. I don't listen to her because now I feel attacked and I'm like, whatever, I'm going to tell you how I feel, I. And we're working on it. It hasn't, the progress is like 1%.
I'm okay with the progress. I feel like at least you understand the
Yesterday
problems.
we reached a big one because she
That was
said,
a
do you
milestone.
understand what I am saying? And I repeated to her what she said. And I said, I understand how you feel right now, but I don't know how to react to it without like giving my emotions out.
Yeah. Go ahead. Michelle wants to talk. Guess talk. Everybody clap. Yay.
So,
I'm just kidding, Michelle. Sorry, I have to embarrass you.
It's not on. Okay.
I want to go back to your point, and I think that's working within yourself, because I used to be the person that wouldn't allow you guys to talk. I wouldn't allow you guys to talk, and you guys were like, you always have something to say, you never listen, da, 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 da. And I think like throughout time, I started to learn how to change that scenario around where now I'm a listener. And you guys are like, Michelle
You never
is
talk.
is our therapist, and she's always listening, and everyone else is like, you guys are always talking about each other. Oh, you make it about yourself. But back then when I was younger, it was all about me when you guys used to talk to me. And I think that's something like, oh, I'm a talker, but I used to be a talker too. And it's something that throughout the years I've learned to become the listener, because I've understood that it's...
I have a question for you. I'm going to challenge you. Can I challenge you, or do you want me to do this after the podcast?
Don't do the psychology thing, because I can pick up on it.
It's just a
anytime.
question. It's just a question.
Fernanda tries the psychology thing on me, and I was like, I've been doing this for like a while now,
This
Fernanda.
is-
I
this
pick
is
it up
exact-
every single time.
This is
I
exactly
was
what
like,
it
I
is.
know what you're doing.
Do you think that the reason you're now a listener instead of a talker is because every time you do talk, you make it about yourself? So instead of talking, you just don't talk because you just don't want to deal with that.
I think I've learned to control myself in a way, because again, going back to like, with the podcast, when we have people and people are talking about their stories, like I'm like in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I can relate. Like I know what you're talking about. But instead of cutting that person off and talking about myself and my experiences, like I need to give you the space to finish talking. Like there's so many things that Missy is saying, and I'm like, I know what you're talking about. And I'm like, in teaching, right? But instead of like stopping and like, oh, about me, this is your time and this is your space. Like, and I can come back later and talk about how in teaching, how, I connect with you.
Yeah.
So like, I think that's a tool that I use with my students. Instead of saying, oh yeah, me, so if you guys see me doing this to you guys a lot, but that's like, hey, I can connect with you, but it's your space to speak.
Yeah. It's like a mental note for you as well, that little signal.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I got you there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so these are little things that like I've learned to pick up along the way to help me, because I do have those impulses. I used to have those, everybody's
kinda
always
do.
working on it, still working on it. But I think like these little things help me to stop myself from cutting other people off and not making it about them anymore. And now it's about me. It's just like, I get you.
Yeah. And I will say it ties into like the work that I do with couples. Because again, this is all about relational like communication. So if someone is in the relationship who's more of the talker and it's all about them and stuff like that, then it has to become a practice. Like it's not just something that gets fixed. It's something that needs to be practiced over time in order for it to change and improve. So that comes up every time if there's couples, especially we're going to be talking about communication most likely. That's always one of the issues at least.
And they're like, we're always talking. No, you guys are always
Even
yelling.
Arguing.
I will say, so I just want to put this little side note in there. Aside from individual therapy, I even did couples therapy with my partner, and we've been together 12 years. And we have really good communication. Like that's always been a good foundational point of a relationship. But then when we finally realize, okay, we're missing something, like something's not clicking, we were like, okay, let's try couples therapy just to like get back on track here. And that was basically it. There was a communication issue going on, and it tied into some of the individual things that we were both kind of exploring for ourselves. So it was a nice way to kind of build that bridge, or like bridge the gap or whatever.
I think that was a great point when you mentioned the practice thing, because it is, for me, it's definitely a practice. Everything I think in life is really practice. If there's something that you feel needs work, the only way to work through it is by practicing what you feel would be the right approach. And just going back to the me and Dunny thing, the reason that I'm now so aware that because I never understood why I had this like with you sometimes. I just
What's it?
it's just a feeling.
Frustration.
Yeah, like even it was cool though, like the way life works, where like when you noticed that you were just calling an event, I was also being like, I was already getting like overwhelmed, and I didn't want to tell you like you only talk, you're only venting, like it just makes me it's the first thing in the morning, it's all this venting. It was making me feel really hard, and I was like, I don't want to not give you the space because I know you need it. It's this whole thing, but it was nice. It like worked out in that way. But also in this time, guys, the reason that I've been missing some episodes is because I'm doing yoga teacher training, which I've mentioned before, and I've learned this tool. It's a tool for communication. It's called active listening.
Yes.
And it's awesome. I use it with my daughter, and it works really well. She's 6, and even her cousin who's 5, they understand it, and it's really helpful for the communicating, because when people are talking, like we've mentioned, it's like they're really just yelling at each other. They're like, you did this. Well, no, I did that because you did that.
It's the blame game.
It's back and forth. And so I practice this with them because they argue a lot. And I'm like, all right, let's active listen, which basically, here, let me just give it a quick background of what it is. There's a listener and there's a sharer. You choose your role, whoever wants to start, and the sharer shares a few sentences. Don't tell them the story because they're gonna have to repeat it back to you. So the sharer will say, "Here's how I'm feeling. This is why I'm feeling," and whatever you want to share. 3 sentences. Keep it to short. Yeah. And then the listener says, "Okay, what I'm hearing you say is," repeats it back to them. So I'm hearing you say that you feel really frustrated with me because I'm not picking up my socks around the house. and it would make you feel better if I picked up my socks around the house. Is that correct? So that's a term. Is that correct?
Just pick it up.
The sharer says yes or no, because sometimes you might repeat it back and they're like, no, that's not what I'm saying. So it's important. So the sharer says yes or no.
Oh, wait. So you say it and they repeat it back on their perspective.
They repeat what they heard.
How they heard it.
Yeah.
So it's their perspective of
like
what
they're actively
said.
listening to you.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is blank, blank, blank. Is that correct? And then the sharer says yes or no. If they say no, they repeat it. If they say yes, you move. And then the listener says, would you like to share more? Okay. It's still your space.
Right.
You'll say yes or no. If you say no, now it's their turn, and the rules switch.
Yeah.
And it was and we practice that in my training because that's really important in being a teacher. And it was only then that I started noticing it all over my life, where like I'm like sharing something and they're like, oh, well, let me just make it about me, or like
understanding you.
Yeah, and no, but it's crazy because no one in my life, I'm actually going through something right now where I'm trying to be like, okay, who in my life can I have that support from? Like, and this is why therapy is so important, because sometimes there is nobody in your life that you can depend on to give you your space, and in therapy, it's kind of
your
their
safe
job.
Space.
Mm-hmm. You're paying for that space.
Yeah. You're like, here we go. Please give me some space to talk. And it's important because many reasons. And can I share my favorite? Does anyone have anything to say? I just want to share my favorite part of therapy.
This is your safe space. Go ahead.
Oh. So next hour. No, just kidding. No, it'll be quick. So I want to share this because this was one of the biggest breakthroughs I've had in therapy. And again, I'm an on and offer, so I'm not consistent. I hope to be, so I'm going to totally work on that. But when I was fresh out of my 10-year relationship, I got into, a few months later, a really toxic relationship. And I was acting in ways that wasn't true to who I am at all.
Out of character?
Super out of character. And the end of that relationship was like way out of character for me. And after it, I felt so much shame. And I actually read a book on shame because I felt so much shame and I didn't understand. I knew I felt something I couldn't. So I read a book on it, and it was like
closure.
And I thought that would help me. I'm like, I'm gonna read a book on this because I know this is what I feel, but I don't really understand it. So let me understand it. Still nothing. It helped a little bit, but I still felt this like. And so I went to therapy. I said I need therapy. Like I can't figure this out on my own. And
wow, all because of that.
Because of this one situation that was so out of character for me that I'm like, why the hell did I do that? That's not me. Like,
did it ever occur to you though that you needed to?
Yeah, everything happens for a reason. I'm totally aware of that, and I'm grateful for all my experiences. But yeah, it was hard at the time.
Yeah.
And then I went to therapy, and I shared the story, and she told me, she was like, well, this makes total sense. And then what I love about therapy is that they give you like information and verbiage to make you understand why it is that it happened the way it did. Yep. So she was like, yeah, so if you're familiar with the 8 stages of Erikson's theory of developmental, during those years of your life, because I got in a relationship when I was 15 until like 25, so she was like, that was the identity versus role confusion years of your life, and you weren't able to develop correctly because you were so focused on this relationship and the messiness of it, so that you couldn't figure out who you were and what your identity and this whole thing. And I was like, oh, and
this makes sense now.
I was like, oh shit. And then she was like, that's why, the way I acted, it was very childish. And she's like, you're kind of still stuck in there because you were never able to work through who you truly are and what you believe in and really set that down. Yeah. And I was like,
I feel like crying right now because I can relate to that so much. I feel like it's for all of us, like we get into young relationships and you think it's cool, and like I think it's fair to say that we all lived a life where like we did what kind of we wanted and we got married young, and you don't develop alone. You don't know how to be. It's like this codependency you create on relationships with other. Like I can relate to that. Like I'm so codependent on other people, like my sister, my husband, like even Michelle. For like I have this tight group, and I'm like I'm not letting go. And then when I'm not able to create new, like, I don't have friends right now because I'm like, I don't want to deal with it.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, but when you go to therapy and then they make you realize, like Fernanda said, like she never had her identity because from 15 to 25, she was working on herself and she was working on someone else because she was in a relationship with someone else. Yeah. So now that you have that gap, it's kind of like, what do I do with myself? Now I have to work.
Who am I?
Now I have to work on me because I don't have someone else to work on anymore. Yeah.
But
I have to work on myself now. And it's scary because it's like, let me go find someone else that we can work on now.
But that's above everything else going on. Like whether it's a kid, a new job, school, like you're literally trying to work on yourself. And it's like this comes back to inner child, right? Because it comes back from our childhood.
Yeah.
And all of these traumas, like I learned about T-bone traumas or something.
Little T, big T trauma. That's a thing.
What is it called? I saw it the other day, and it's like it's pretty much when you have some people have like big traumas, like things that really like a death or like sexual abuse or whatever it was, neglect growing up, and then there's like the little ones that we don't realize, but it's like, oh, it's there, and that's why I act the way I do, but. I don't know. I just feel like it's really easy to lose yourself when, like she said, you're in a relationship. Like, I feel like that all the time. I was never alone. I think the longest I went single was probably, like, 6 months. I turned 21. I was like, woohoo, let's go. And then I was, like, met my husband.
I think for the experience for me, the reason it was so important is because after that session, I was like, oh, I'm normal. Like, this is normal and I can change it. Right. And I just felt super, super empowered. And I guess that goes back. I have a question in regards to that. It goes back to kind of what we already talked about.
A lot of questions.
Of course.
We have
a therapist in the house. Hello.
Question.
Therapy session here.
No. It's not about me. It's just in general. One question is, how do you support your clients in this like self-empowerment journey of theirs? Like, are you one of those, are you an activity giver? Are you a homework giver? Are you a like, just think about it? Are you a reflector? Like, how do you, and I know you said there's many different methods, just can you speak on your methods or like how you kind of support that?
Yes. I am an activity giver.
I love activity givers.
Homework.
She can't be your therapist, Fernanda.
I know. Why are we friends?
I do give homework pretty frequently because it's more so like I love being the therapist, but I want to empower my clients to be able to have that autonomy and function separate from our sessions and be able to apply what they're learning in session to the rest of their life. And, my goal is like, yeah, I'll work for you for as long as you want to work with me, but I don't want you to feel like you need me forever. Like, I just don't want that. 'Cause again, I want them to feel empowered. Like, again, this is normal. I can handle this. I can work through this. I can change. So yes, activities for sure. I know this ties into art therapy. Art therapy is all based on directives. Those are specific activities that we will incorporate into the therapy session as an intervention. And then for like self-empowerment, there's been a few clients that I've worked with where I've just kind of tied in things that I have utilized for myself over time, that I know work, at least have worked for me and perhaps have worked for others. So they could be very minimal. Again, like reading some text on the topics that we're exploring, or okay, so why don't you practice what we did in therapy on your own this week and bring it back so we can talk about it more. And sometimes, sometimes they won't do it and that's another conversation. But most of the time they'll do it and they'll come back and they're like, oh man, I've been really utilizing this. And it'll be like, a month, 2 months later. And they're like, yeah, so I've been utilizing what you taught me like 5 weeks ago.
I love it.
So that's always nice to hear. And other times it might be something more like a spiritual thing, however you want to kind of perceive it. But there was a fire ceremony that I was a part of at the end of one of my semesters in grad school, and we literally wrote and or drew something in response to what our professor prompted us on. So she wanted us to draw or write something that we're going to, that's going to continue serving us as we move forward into the next semester, and something that, has served us, that's something we can let go of. So when I started working with one of my clients on the concept of letting go, and kind of that process of being able to transition from letting go, but also being able to hold on to the lessons and stuff like that, I suggested the fire ceremony. And I was like, you don't have to do fire. We could choose a different element. And
Water.
This is honestly, yes.
Drown it.
This is honestly hilarious.
Put it in the blender.
The first thing she came to mind was like, can I flush it down the toilet? And I was like, absolutely. Like,
Whatever you want.
If it's flushable.
yeah, exactly. I was like, you can write it on a napkin, like, or a tissue.
That
Dissolves.
so funny. There was this one time. That's so funny that you mentioned that, because I truly believe in fire. When I lived in Brazil, I think I've done it so many times. I would write the boy's name over, and like my first boyfriend, I did that. I wrote it over and over.
I'm burning you out of my mind.
Again. And like a notebook, I literally wrote his name like all over, and I said, "Fuck you." And then and then here, I think I was like 18, 19. I had this really bad breakup, and she was like, "Let's go to the beach." Mm-hmm. So do you remember this? I had like a little thing, and I buried it in the sand.
Oh yeah, we buried her. Well, it was kind of like anything that kind of remembered.
I had a whole box. It was like
And I said
from
to-
sweaters to underwear to little.
It's in the beach?
Probably.
Somebody's gonna find the letter.
No, just kidding.
But it was basically her saying goodbye and saying I'm
Yeah.
moving on. Well, I actually forgot about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we went to the beach, and sorry, Fernanda, I guess it was littering, but it gave me closure.
I'm glad it helped you, but not her earth. No, I'm just kidding.
It's
fine.
We
I'm sure
went
it
to the
was
beach,
gone now.
and she was like, I was so angry, and she's like, let it out. And I was just crying.
Wow, I was a therapist once.
Yeah, and I had
You gave her
the boy's
space?
favorite sweater, and then she was very supportive. We walked, Seaside. We walked all the way down the rocks, and we found a little spot. And I remember after that day, there was nothing else of that person in my home that I could look at and say like, oh, that reminds me of you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it took me like a good 2 years. And then I finally started like, okay, this, you know, it gets easier.
Yeah.
And then now like I think about it and I'm like, I wish I could do that with everything. It's kind of like, it's mental because like, who gives a shit that it's like a sweater? Right. But in my mind, I was like, as long as it's there, that means that he's still here. And I need to get rid of it.
It's hard to let go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have a question for you. Art therapy. Is that, I want to understand more what exactly is art therapy, and do you bring that on the first session, or is it something that you kind of feel out the client first and then you're like, okay, I think art therapy you would benefit from it. Let's work on it. How do you decide when art therapy is a good thing?
Mm-hmm. So if I was practicing in an art therapy practice, the first intake might utilize an art therapy assessment, which is a little different from a directive. So literally just assessing, okay, so what materials might this client be ready or not ready to engage in during sessions? And like maybe, okay, if there's an assessment going on, a specific one with like, we're looking at the formal elements of the drawing or whatever is created. What can those elements tell us? So things like, I mean, this is going to be like very choppy, but like line pressure or the amount of color in the piece and things like that.
So is art therapy kind of what they're viewing when you're showing them something? Like reading that art? What exactly is art? Are they drawing as you're?
The client will be in the position of creating art in the session as the intervention.
Oh my God.
So like the
That's
way
amazing.
way that we use things like cognitive behavioral therapy, we can use that in addition to an art-based intervention.
I have a question I think can help visualize this.
Uh-huh.
And it's gonna kind of touch on trauma and art therapy, right? So would you say, and I'll ask a few because I think, would you say art therapy, for me, I love art therapy. I love art and I love doing that. Like I can feel the benefits of doing it on my own time, just painting for fun kind of thing.
Yes.
But for me, art therapy, I associate, and I could be wrong, I associate that for like more children. Like for me, I'm like, my daughter, she needs it. Art therapy is definitely like the approach I want to take with whatever she has to deal with. Is art therapy for everyone, or is it specific? Is it more towards children? Because like, can you just speak on that a little bit?
Art therapy is for everyone.
Okay.
I personally, I only worked with 2 children in my internship experience. So the majority of people I've worked with have all been adults, and they've all benefited very much from the art therapy process. That's a huge misconception, that art therapy is going to be for children. And the way that we try and kind of separate that is also in the materials that we provide. You know, Crayola is great. We love Crayola, and they also have some like signature items that are a little more fancy looking that we can utilize. But we're not going to give a room full of adults washable markers and Crayola crayons for their art therapy intervention. We're going to make them feel like adults, like they're not engaging in some child play, because that can be beneficial in some aspects, but if our focus is more so on creating something and kind of using it as a therapeutic intervention too, then we want them to feel like they're being treated as adults and not as children. And also adults can use different materials that maybe children won't be able to use. Things like sharp objects, like to cut and stuff like that, or small beads, if children are going to put those in their mouth or something like that. We don't want, we have to be mindful of those things. So like I said, with like an intake, like the first session, the assessment can be tied into that, like assessing, okay, so what materials are appropriate for this person or this demographic, especially if you're like doing a group counseling thing. What materials are appropriate for the type of population we're working with. So, for example, I was interning in a rehabilitation and behavioral center, and I worked with adults in recovery from substance and alcohol addictions. And so if I was in the detox area where they're much more vulnerable, like in a more vulnerable state, and versus the rehab area, I would not introduce paint because it's too loose of a material.
Yeah.
And it has shown, like, just like in some evidence-based research, it has shown to influence like more regressive behaviors.
Oh, wow.
I use that term lightly because there's another way I could say that, but any loose materials, you're gonna it's reflecting your emotion too. So you might feel a little out of control with the material. So if I'm gonna work with someone in detox who may be a little more vulnerable at the moment, we're gonna use more structured materials, harder structured oil pastels or pencils. But again, we don't want anything too sharp then.
Right.
If there's anyone who's like actively suicidal, so we don't really want to use scissors. So if we're going to do collaging, they can rip it and glue it. Things like that. So there's like so much thinking that has to go into the process. And that's another aspect of why the schooling is so important, because the materials can impact someone's response, like emotional response, and that can make or break the session. So that can influence, okay, is this safe?
I'd never heard of that. That is like so
Art therapy is
interesting.
amazing.
Yeah. And so like I said, so it's for everyone. So when we're working with children, yeah, they might have more access to like the typical maybe Crayola materials that we use, which are safer as well, because we don't want
It's
them
just crayons.
we don't want them putting toxic materials in their mouths.
Right.
And also, just on their hands, they touch their faces all the time.
I think for me, where the misconception comes in is just it just seems like it makes sense for children to do art therapy. I guess it's more of like, for children, I would choose specifically art therapy because it's a way that they can communicate without having to use words, which a lot of children, probably adults, struggle with it. So I cannot imagine children still learning words. So I think that's what I feel, but because if I had all the money in the world, I'd be doing art therapy every freaking day because I love it. Well, and if I could, good question. Is art therapy more expensive than regular therapy? Is there a difference in pricing?
It depends on where you're going for treatment. Unfortunately, so at least the state of Connecticut, when I started grad school, it recognized it as its own license. So like even in the state of Connecticut now, I wouldn't have to get my LPC to be like, well, sorry, back up. I would definitely have to like still fulfill the clinical requirements, so I might as well have my LPC, which is what I'm working towards right now. But there is something called the CLAT in Connecticut now, which is a clinically licensed art therapist. Most of the country that art therapy is recognized, you're gonna have a registered art therapy or like board certified registered art therapist credential. It's not a license. So you would have to have that additional, like whatever state you're in.
Wow.
Here it would be the LPC. Other states it might be, the MHL.
And because of that, it makes, from a client standpoint, because you have more credibility, the sessions become more expensive?
No, it's that what I was actually getting at is that if it's recognized as an actual state license, then it can, if you choose to take insurance, you can take insurance.
I was going to say, how does that affect insurance?
If you're just a registered or board certified registered art therapist, without the CLAT or without the LPC, let's just focus on Connecticut, then I wouldn't be able to take insurance.
It'd be like that
it would
full
have to be
price.
self-pay. Yeah. So then it would be, up to the clinician to determine, okay, so what's my price range? Am I going to have a sliding scale to be more accessible, or is this it? And I personally, I want to be able to be more accessible, so I will stay
Right.
with insurance, even though insurance is
I heard a pain.
a hell. It's a hellscape for most clinicians, but I choose to be accessible, so I am going to take insurance in the future, no matter what. I take insurance now, but as a resident counselor,
not
it's
your
very
problem.
minimal.
Yeah. You're like, you deal with that,
Yeah.
Connie.
There's only 4 insurances that will let me take them right now.
I wanted to say that because we're here talking therapy and it's all rainbows and butterflies, but the reality of it is we live specifically, let's focus in Connecticut. It is so hard for people to get state insurance, or if you do have insurance from your job, they take this huge chunk of money from your paycheck every week. And it doesn't even cover the basics.
Right.
It's almost like therapy and mental health is a privilege.
Yeah,
It is.
unfortunately.
That's so funny. We actually just had someone come in for health insurance here at my job because we're looking at the plan for next
Yeah.
year. And every single year, someone comes in, and every single year, I say, "Is there a health insurance, a mental health portion?" But
And there's
no,
no,
Nope.
no.
it's unfortunate.
So
It's super unfortunate.
it's all rainbow and
That
butterflies, but
right.
realistically speaking,
That ties back to what Fernanda said. The same way that you go to the doctors for a physical, why is it not normal for you to go to the doctors for your mental health?
Yeah.
And the fact that
because
it's
they don't
not,
want us to win.
right, but the fact that it's not something normal in insurance makes people think that
Yeah,
this isn't
that,
a
oh, okay,
necessity.
it's not a necessity, yeah.
Right.
okay,
And that's crazy to me.
It should be a
because-
necessity.
because our mental health and our physical health are not mutually exclusive. They're not separate at all. There's always going to be a way that something is affecting the other thing.
100%.
So
Because if you're mentally not well, you're physically not well.
Right.
yeah, and if you're
Yes.
physically not
Yeah.
well,
You're
you're probably going to be end up being mentally unwell. Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of the stigmas that still need to break. I do think our generation now is working towards that more than ever
yeah.
because we're making
I
it
think
more
our
aware.
future is
We're
gonna
talking
need it
more
more than
about
ever.
it. I think there's
that's what
more
I
of
was
the
gonna say.
conversation of therapy, right?
Yeah.
Back when we were younger, and that's why at 19, what was therapy? It wasn't a conversation.
and this might be a touchy subject, but I definitely want to get into it because I was literally just having a conversation yesterday with the girls, and I'm like, do you guys realize that every 3 seconds somebody is committing suicide in the world? Every 3 seconds. So if I sit here and I say 1, 2, 3, boom, somebody's dead. Over 800,000 people just in the U.S. commit suicide a year. And we're talking mostly men. And there's not this is what pisses me off in our system, right? You're making it so inaccessible. You're making it so hard. Already on top of the misconception, the little information we have out there, women are more likely to go seek mental help because men have this thing,
Stigma.
yeah, we were talking about generations before us, 20, 30 years ago. What's therapy for men, right? And then out of this rate, 68% is men. And they choose lethal weapons like guns and knives. They're doing it to do it, right? And so this past week we had this famous Twitch from Ellen DeGeneres that committed suicide.
Rest in peace.
Right. And it's that broke me because I was like, we're talking about men that look happy on the outside, right? And everybody's like, how could you do this? You had 3 kids. And this is where mental health comes into play. You see somebody that probably had the access and probably had the resources, and it still wasn't enough, right? But
Yeah. Exactly.
we're talking about the men that don't have access, that don't have the money, that don't have the insurance, and you're like, I need help and I don't have a way out.
I do think it's supply and demand, though. I do, people, it's not just men, but a lot of people, even, Donnie just started going, even I have a best friend who I'm like, definitely therapy, sweetie.
But
definitely.
see, she has insurance, though.
Right,
most
exactly.
people
So-
don't.
Yeah, but I get it. I get that there is no insurance.
It's just an issue that isn't talked about enough, and I feel like even, and this maybe goes in a little bit into politics,
It does. Absolutely.
they don't give a shit. They're literally like,
yeah.
You don't
we're-
ever hear them saying that they're going to advocate for that.
It's just
during
not a big
elections.
deal enough.
Right.
If we,
We're-
as
We're
if-
talking about student loan forgiveness, which great, beautiful, right? We're talking about Black people that have like, there's like this state that they're trying, that this bill they're trying to pass in California to give Black people that come from like, you know, families from slavery and whatever, recompensation of like 250,000
Hell yeah.
whatever per family, per person. And then I'm like, that is all great. Those
That's
are,
called advocating.
right,
So-
but
they're
those are all,
advocating
they're
for
all
it.
great issues. But we're not talking, like, mental health is something that impacts you, whether you're white, you're Black, you're Chinese, whatever, like.
But that's-
right. And it's like, why are we not hearing people say, like, let's make a bill for, I don't care how naggy it sounds. Honestly, I'm like, it's your brain. It's something that every single human has. You are born with it.
Well, that's kind of the purpose of today's episode, but in general, like, this conversation needs to be had more because not enough people are talking about it. So not enough people are advocating for it. And because not enough people are advocating for it, nothing's being done about it. Even though I feel like we're in a better place than we were yesterday and
Yeah.
a few years ago. So we're working on it. It's just, it doesn't come overnight. And it's important. It's really, it's important to make all these shifts in the system for sure, but it's also, as friends and family members and loving of, you know, partners and all that, it's our job too if you see someone who, how can we help them get there?
So I'm going to bring up something that happened yesterday, and we were having a conversation, and we were talking about, and this goes back to suicide, right? And someone said, like, oh, but you know, sometimes some people do it for attention. And that broke me because I was like, nobody kills themselves for attention. Like, you're purposely ending your life.
Yeah, no.
And it was because it was this guy that was a principal, and I think it's the principal, the guy, and he went to a Disney parking lot, and they're like, oh, but why would he do it at Disney? And I'm like, do people even begin to understand what is a mentally unstable person?
Right.
Yeah,
That's
like the complexity of
Maybe he doesn't
everything.
even know where he was going, or maybe that was just a special spot for him, and he was like, this is where I want my last moment to be. Or I don't want to do it inside of my house because that'll cause my family trauma forever. Like the Twitch guy, he went to a hotel. And so beautiful family, beautiful life, money, and all of these things that life can bring you. And it's still not enough. I don't understand because I feel like that sometimes too. Like, I have everything. I have a beautiful husband, a beautiful son. I have a good job. I love my boss.
Beautiful sister.
Right. Beautiful cousins. I mean, sure. And I just don't understand. It's that
Okay.
it's that little like brain cell that's missing, that little chemical, and like why?
imbalance.
I keep asking, why am I here? What is my purpose? Why do I feel this way? And I feel like no therapy in the world till this day can, like, they're helping me, right? But it doesn't explain it.
And coming from the other side of the person that has to be her support, it's hard to understand because I can go through depression, but I'm not suicidal because I love my life too much and I love the people around me too much. So when it happens, and for years I struggled with this with her, and the whole attention thing came up plenty of times of like, Jackie's just doing it for attention, right? But me as her sister, I always had that fear of like, what if, and I've gotten this question asked so many times, like, until when are you going to enable her behavior, right? Until when are you going to enable her saying she's suicidal? And in the back of my mind is, if I take the chance and it actually happens, I will never forgive myself for not being her support. And I think that's where the hard part comes of like, do I take it serious or do I take it lightly? And then she actually goes and does it, right? Because there is people that do not commit, but like do it for attention. Like, oh, I'm suicidal. Oh, I'm gonna hurt
I don't
myself.
know if they're-
But I mean, there's someone that I personally know that
think-
did
I
it,
think
that did something to
teenagers-
himself, and then immediately was like, "Hey, take me to the hospital. I think I
kidding.
fucked up here. I'm kidding. I don't want to." But we're not going to generalize that, right? So until when am I not going to take you serious? Until you go and do it, right? But at the same time, it's frustrating because it's like, get over yourself. You have a beautiful son. You have a beautiful husband. You have a beautiful life. Like, there's so many people that go through more trauma than you. Like, you have a good job. Like, what is wrong with you? That is the feeling, the true feeling that you have. But I have to be empathetic to you're going through an chemical imbalance or whatever it is that you're going through, and you're feeling it. And I can't put that in your head that you have a good life.
Yeah.
I
But
can't.
Let's also remember, because there's a difference, right? And if we're talking suicide, I this is a subject that I, in so many moments of my life, and this is why I'm so like fixated on it. It's so much easier to be like, oh my God, if I die tomorrow, like I don't have any more bills, I don't have any more, I don't have to deal with these feelings that I don't see other people trying to deal with. So why me? Right? And so, like, there's different types, right? Because I think I'm a passive aggressive. I've never actually tried to kill myself. So it comes up a lot in therapy, and it comes up a lot in my I text her a lot, and I'm like, yo, I could literally just off myself today. Like this, I'm feeling so overwhelmed. I don't know how to deal with my emotions. And then there's people that actually, I've read a book. Fernanda, my turn.
About books.
Oh yeah, which book is it?
It's
I'll post it on
called,
Instagram.
Hello, I Want to Die. Please help me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it's called. And it's essentially this woman, don't know her name, but we'll post it. We will. And she's telling her story, and she's tried to commit suicide like hundreds of times. And then it got to a point where she goes in the book and she says, and that was something you relate. You're like, it sucks that you're in this position, that you're putting everybody else you love in so much pain. But what about my pain? Like, why is nobody understanding why I'm doing it in the first place, right? So there's this thing between the suicidal person and the people that are around, because you don't think you're loved until you do it. And then everybody's like, wow, like, I loved you so much and I cared so much. So, like, I get when she's saying, like, oh, my God, it's exhausting to I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes we are so blinded with this feeling like I'm a burden. I would be so much better off if I wasn't here. I'm mentally unstable and I'm giving you so much trouble. And they don't see it like that. Like, yeah, they're exhausted, but they're like, if you're gone, it's not going to fix the issues. It's just going to make it worse. So I think there's a difference between the passive aggressive person that's suicidal, like it's in the back of their mind and they're like feeling these emotions and they're like, oh, maybe one day. Because I don't wake up in the morning and say, like, I want to kill myself today. I don't wake up in the morning and say, like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it. I just feel like if I wasn't here. So it's not I want to die. I just don't want to live.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, like, because I
have two things to say in response to, I think it's kind of both.
Yeah.
One, I do want to just kind of plug this in as an advocate and like as my background as both a therapist and in like higher ed. The language that we use to talk about suicide, you know, some people might not mind really, but as the person I am, I do like to educate where I can, where like committing suicide, it has such a ring to it that it's like they've committed a crime.
Yeah.
And so we do use the term like they died by suicide.
That's interesting.
And it's something to that for me personally, something to that little change also brings it back around to, even though they made that decision ultimately to kill themselves and die, there was some other part that was out of their control. Whether it was about the mental, like chemical imbalances, or just the fact that the society's systemic issues set them up for failure.
Yeah.
So like there's still responsibility in the way that our society lacks support for the individuals who do end up dying by suicide. So there's that. I wanted to just kind of like name that. And then to kind of talk to your point about, both of your points actually, this is probably going to be like a more personal share because that's where my mind is right now. But yeah, why am I on an antidepressant? Because in the past year, those thoughts kept coming up and I was like, girl, like you know you don't want to die, but you're tired of living. And it's like you want to be here. You want to witness, you know, I have so many nieces and nephews and I adore them. Like you want to witness them grow up and stuff like that. You don't want to leave them behind. And like that other aspect of the exhaustion, the people who love us, I was never very open. I'm still not really. But like I was never really open about those thoughts. It was just all about, okay, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to process it myself. Maybe I'll tell some close friends. I will obviously tell my partner. And maybe one of my brothers and my sister-in-law, you know, like just like a handful of people. And it got to the point where I was recognizing, oh my gosh, like it wasn't even about being a burden or feeling like a burden, because that was tied into it. Of course, I did feel like a burden, especially to my partner, because he's, you know, like the sweetest man ever.
He's not worried about you.
Yeah, and he was worried, but he didn't have anything to help me except just be there for me. And so that's how I encouraged him to go to therapy, because I'm like, I can't help you because I don't even know how to help myself right now. So I need you to talk to someone, because I can't imagine being in a relationship with someone who's constantly who would be constantly telling me, I don't want to be alive. Like, that's hard. I can just imagine how hard that can be.
The pressure of like, what can I do?
Yeah. So I'm glad that, you know, that actually motivated him to go talk to someone for himself, to figure out ways that he could process that and support me the best that he can in those moments. But yeah, I don't even know if any of that gives an answer, but it's just,
That's my life story right there. I mean, I have the sweetest, like, my husband is, whoever knows Danny, like, he's down to earth. Like, he's calm and collected. He's in control of his feelings. And then he meets this atomic bomb, like, poof, fucking fucks up his. I'm like, it's true. We're, like, completely the opposite. And he's like, when I met you, I was actually, like, that's when I think I mentioned I was single, and I was actually, like, happy for once in my life. I was 21. I could buy my own drinks. And I had a really good job, and I had just gotten out of, like, a relationship that was, like, kind of toxic. It wasn't that toxic, but it was just wasn't good. And I felt free, and I felt like, wow, like, this is it. And then, like, mind you, my husband's been in the family before I was even born. I just didn't know. And I was on Facebook, whatever, and long story short, we ended up talking, and then we meet, and I'm like, wow, this is a breath of fresh air. It's somebody that, like, I told him since day one, like, I'm depressed. I have, like, these issues. I literally, like, it's somebody that I confided in, and that's when I knew, like, okay, this is it, right? And he looked at me, and he's like, wow, that's crazy, because I would have never, ever in my life think that you have these issues, because you're such a happy, like, I think I'm pretty funny. I think I'm the clown in the room, like, the clown.
She can be fun when she wants to.
Yeah.
Would you call it issues? Was that the right term when you're saying? Because Jackie just said I have these issues. Is there a better term to use? Because to me that feels so. It just feels negative versus positive, and I don't feel like are they issues, or are they just realities of what it is?
I mean, I think it can be a little bit of both. Like, yeah, it is your reality. It is what you're living with.
Right.
But yeah, I think if we can call it an issue, it is, because that's literally, like, it needs work.
Got it.
And again, like any other issue that we bring forward in kind of like society, these are those issues, like, that need more attention.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no. But that's pretty much bottom line. Like, it's hard to deal with. I've never understood my sister until I met my husband, because seeing him deal with me and the meltdowns, and I mean, for God's sake, this poor man, I slashed his tires once. Oh my God. I was angry.
It's not a joke. She's really serious.
I believe it.
And I tell this all the time. He did not leave you that day. He's never going to leave you.
We were, like, on a break, like, the baby. This was, like, last year, and he was living somewhere else, and I was like, today's your day to stay with the baby. And this is, like, how in not control of my emotions I was, because, like, I knew I wanted to be in that relationship, and I knew what I wanted. I just didn't know how to. It's all about, like, controlling your emotions, right? And I was like, oh my God, like, I want this man, and now this man does, because I broke up, and then he didn't want to come back to the house. I go to his house, and I'm like, you're not going out today. Like, you're staying with the baby. And he's like, no, but it's not my day. And I was like determined to be like, I don't give a shit. You're not going out. Because I was like, you know. And so in that moment, it blinds you on a point of like, my mind goes somewhere else. And it's not on purpose. Mm-hmm. You're just so angry and you don't know how to like. And so I ended up slashing his tires. And I remember.
I'm laughing right now because she sat in his living room and she said, we're going to stay home with the baby. It wasn't like, here's your kid. No. I'm going to sit in your living room and watch you do bedtime with him.
But you know what's the worst part? This is how calm and collected. Like, yeah, he cursed me out when I slashed his tires, but he was like, okay, you're in here. You're not leaving. I'm not touching you. Just don't talk to me. We're going to put the baby down. We're going to act like everything is normal. Mm-hmm. He calls his mom. His mom is like, what is happening? But it was fine. He was in control of his emotions. And I think I learned so much from, I think it's important to have that person in your life when you're that earthquake. Mm-hmm. And it sucks for them, but like for me, it's so beneficial.
It sucks for you, Danny, but I love it.
Jeez. He sat there. We did the baby's bedtime. And then he looked at me and said, get the fuck out of my house. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, fair. We put the baby down. And then
before I go, though, you're not going to be able to go out tonight.
Yeah, but he ended up going, which is fine. He put the baby down. But it was like, he calls me later that night, and he's like, I get you. I know what you're feeling. And, like, I know it's hard, but I'm frustrated right now. And I never get frustrated. So I need you to prove me that you want this, right? And that's when I started, like, okay, you're giving so much, and I've been abusing it. I need to give something back. And I think that's the thing of somebody that's an earthquake within themselves. And I feel like that could go for anybody. You could be quiet on the outside, but on the inside, you're like this person with all these issues. And like, you always expect people, because I expect people to be there for me. Because I'm like, oh my God, like my situation is so much worse. And then like, now I'm understanding like, no, it's not that bad. There's people that have it worse out there. Mm-hmm. So I need to be understanding. And like my husband. And so I don't know if you guys get what I'm trying to say, but you take a step back and you're like, I've been taking so much. I need to give some now. And I need to find it within this mess and this craziness and this sickness, because I feel like it's not on purpose. I need to find a way out, and I need to be there for you too. And like, there's things that I can't explain that you're going to have to go to therapy or go to someone else or do whatever you got to do. But this little part of me and this is, I guess, relationship, but it could go for anything. It could go for siblings, even with my sister or family. Like, I need us to compromise, because like I'm going through something, but I also want to be there for you, and I don't want to overwhelm you anymore.
I'm kind of interested in knowing, like, Missy, with your client, if you got a client like Jackie and you see that she's going through all of this and it involves so many people in her life, do you suggest like, let's do therapy with your sister, with your mother, with your husband? Is that something that like you guys bring into?
Just also within that question, when do you think it's the point of like, okay, you need to go somewhere for rehab or like, you know?
Like when you need a higher level of care.
Yes.
Yeah, well, again, I think that goes with assessment and stuff like that, like actually the scored assessments, rather than just talking about the symptoms.
Yeah.
But also, so if you're not making progress in a period of time, because as a therapist, more often than not, the treatment plans are using SMART goals, which I think almost anyone might have heard of. But so they're measurable. And if you're not making progress within a specific period of time, give or take some flexibility with it, then that conversation needs to be had.
Right.
Like, is this the right form of care for you in this moment, or do you need to explore a higher form of care? And once you're done with that higher form of care, can you return, or would you like to? And let's try again. There was another question I thought. Yes, gotcha. So things like little aspects of the therapy goals or something, or the symptoms. So like what I'm just hearing from what you shared is more so like this impulsivity that would come up from the emotions feeling so out of control.
Yeah.
And so that would be like a focus area on, okay, how do we work on that? And if that's not working out on your own, then maybe we can bring someone in for like a session. But ethically, I wouldn't be able to work with her individually and then her inside a family or couples setting.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would have to keep those separate. So yes, I can recommend it. I can maybe assess it a little bit, like bring that person in to one session and they can just be there. Maybe they can give some input. I'm not really being their therapist. I'm more so just using them as a tool. And then if the client would like to pursue utilizing family or couples therapy, then I would refer them to another therapist.
Like family
for,
therapy.
Yeah, for that.
Would you work together with that therapist?
Totally could, if that's what the client wants, to coordinate care. Yeah, absolutely. So that there would be an understanding of, okay, so what are we exploring here? But sometimes, clients, maybe they won't want you to know what you're talking about in couples therapy versus individual, or like with my psychiatrist and my therapist, they're in the same practice. I'm an open book. I'm like, you can talk about me however you want.
Every angle.
Yeah. But they told me at the start, they were like, if there's ever something you don't want me sharing with so-and-so, let us know. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but that doesn't apply to me personally. Right. But yeah, I guess that would be it.
No, that's true. Cause like even where I do my therapy, we do have family couples therapy, and I'm like, how would it work if he would have to do it? We would both have to do individual therapy and then have a couple therapist.
Yeah, well, if that's the way you want to go about it, I always encourage that. Like, it would be important for the other person to have an individual therapist too. They don't require it,
right?
But that would be important so that they can then also process that individual stuff on the side instead of just being in the couples session.
Right.
Goes back to everybody should go to therapy.
Question. I don't know if we're done with questioning, but
Yeah.
I have a question that is about you and your family.
Yeah.
Because you are a therapist, or when you decided to take that route, does your family members treat you differently, or do they act different around you now that you are a therapist? Because of course, like, right, I always tell them, I'm like, I'm a teacher. Please do not do anything crazy around me with your kids. Don't talk crazy around your kids, because like legally,
I'm a mandated reporter.
We call her the mall cop.
Yeah, she's the mom.
So like, do they act different around you now that you are a therapist, or?
I would say no, they don't.
No.
So I've always been the listener. I've always been the voice of reason in my family, being the youngest, which is wild.
Crazy.
And all of I would say most of my siblings have come to me for support.
How many do you have?
4.
Girlfriend.
So you're essentially their free therapist.
Sometimes there's boundaries, right? There's so many boundaries, and ethically, like, I need to put those boundaries up because, one, it could do them harm, but also I got to worry about myself.
Right.
But yeah, those things come up, and I will literally say, like, I said this to my sister recently. I said in a text message, I'm like, I'm showing up in therapy mode because I don't think I can be your sister right now.
Right.
Like, I need you to hear this, and that's it. So, just some of those boundaries are enforced.
Does it work for, like, usually with family members?
Yeah. And other times, I have a brother who probably would, like, just not take that. Oh, okay. Like, he would not take that. So I wouldn't use that with him. I'll just be real with him 100%. Like, stop.
Yeah.
But
You're being crazy. Just stop.
Yeah. But no, they don't treat me differently because they've always seen me as the therapist, like, quote unquote.
It was meant to be.
Yeah. I mean, I knew since I was, I think, 9 years old.
Wow.
I was like, I want to do psychology. I didn't know what the hell that was at 9 years old. I just knew because of the books I would read growing up. Oh, psychologists can help people. That's it. Like,
it's
that
like
was
a
it.
doctor. You just know it can help people. That's it. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. And so I knew that I wanted to do something with that. And so ever since I was a little kid, they would always talk about me being the analyzer. And, like, they would make jokes throughout undergrad people, like family friends and stuff would be like, "Oh, what are you finding out about your dad? He's a whack job, right? Like, have you analyzed him yet? Have you diagnosed him?" And I make jokes about it, but then even now as an actual therapist, we're not supposed to do that.
Right.
Do not diagnose your family members. But I have a good handful of diagnoses.
But I keep top She has a little handbook. It's a little black book. Dad,
And-
Mom.
But that's also made my relationships with my family members easier because
Yeah.
I've been
How to deal with
able
it.
I've been able to separate myself like emotionally from the bullshit that they do or like make me feel sometimes.
Sorry,
Right.
family.
Yeah.
We're just being honest here.
I was listening to a podcast the other day, and this lady, she is I think it's a psychiatrist specialized in what do you call it? People that are psychos, right? Is that the right
Mental.
word? No, like
Like sociopaths,
Sociopaths,
or like
sociopaths.
actively psychotic.
no sociopaths.
Sociopaths. Okay.
And she said that once she started her career, she walks in a room and people literally like scatter around because she feels like everybody thinks that she could she's like,
Oh
I
my
can't just
goodness,
look at
like,
you
no.
and say you're a psychopath or whatever it is.
What's the definition of a sociopath or a psychopath? If that's
Well, I would say so sociopath. I don't know a definition, to be honest.
It's not her field.
no, I know. I wonder, like, because I never
There's
know the
traits.
difference.
Yeah, there. Again, it is about traits.
I think socio is more the mental with another person, and the psycho is more within yourself.
Yeah,
Is that what it-
and I would say almost anyone can enter psychosis at some point. It really depends on what's going on. So yeah. So it's like just because someone might be considered psychotic, like actively in psychosis, it doesn't mean they're a sociopath.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they're dangerous, but they might cause harm to themselves or others. It really depends on what's going on with them, which is that kind of goes into like that higher level of care.
Yeah.
In my job, if we find out, whether it's through the intake or just down the line, that a client who's looking for services is actively suicidal or homicidal, okay, you need a higher level of care before we can work with you again.
But just by looking at them, you can't.
No, you cannot.
Right.
Like
People
like there's obviously like moments where you're watching a TV show or something, but you're still getting other information and you're like, oh, okay. But no, there's no way to freaking tell if someone's a sociopath.
I think people are scared too because you could tell by body language too if you analyze someone long enough, like when they're lying but I get why people would be scared.
But legally, and now I'm going to talk about the experience of teaching.
Yep.
Same thing. It's just like, because you've been in the field for so long, like sometimes there's little things you can pick up on and you're like, but responsibly, ethically, you want to have that analyzed. You want to have the data on paper.
Yes.
Because
you don't want to assume. You just don't want to assume.
right down the line, it's like, ooh,
And
I
that
just missed
goes-
that one
Yep.
little piece, and it seemed like it, but then that one little thing was the turning point.
Yep. And that goes for anything. Like when we're diagnosing as therapists, with my job, with the system that we use, we have to put a diagnosis on the first note. So can you imagine meeting someone for an hour and just determining, okay, yeah, so this is what their diagnosis is.
Right.
So a lot of times, like I know there's a lot of clinicians who end up just putting adjustment disorders, but I personally don't like that because that's going to have to change eventually anyways. But also adjustment disorder, in the terminology of it, it's saying that you're having a hard time adjusting to something you otherwise should be adjusting to. And that's hard for me to accept as a person because I'm like, most things are really hard to adjust to. Like
Everything.
So it's really hard for me to just apply adjustment disorders to like all my clients who I'm uncertain of. So I will usually go with, okay, so go down the lines of what symptoms they gave me, and maybe I'll choose the best fit of the diagnosis, but still have it unspecified.
Right.
Like I won't do something very specific until I'm sure, and we work through it more in sessions. Yeah.
And even if it doesn't work, you go back and you can like
We can change it.
You reassess it and say like,
Yes.
okay, I don't think you're bipolar. I think whatever else, we're gonna try this route now, because I know it could be exhausting. Like that's happened to me before.
Yeah.
Like to the point, say like you're bipolar, and I'm like no. And then I met like my therapist. I don't think you're bipolar. I think you're just mild to severe, and you have a hard time addressing things, and it's the issues of the feelings not being contained, right? So like I've done that, and I've got like 4 different diagnoses, and I gave her the list, and she looked at it. She's like, "What the fuck is this?" She literally said, "Excuse my language. What the fuck is this?" And I was like, "Yeah." So that's, and then she said a thing that really got to me too. When I was in therapy, and we're talking, and I'm like, I feel like there's a big part of us that we believe what we're fed, right? Like, so like if somebody's telling you constantly, like,
Someone labels,
you are
To
crazy,
identify.
you do this, you do that, you, and then you're like, oh, am I? And then you start questioning yourself, and then you're like, am I bipolar? Am I depressed? Am I?
That makes sense.
And then when somebody asks you, oh, what are you? And you're like, oh, I'm bipolar. Like, no, you're not bipolar.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have these symptoms, but that is not you. That does not define you. So I think it's easy for us as patients to be like, oh, I was diagnosed so and so, and this is what I am now. And so when people ask me, I'm going to say that this is what I am. And your brain doesn't have this thing of like, I can snap out of this. This is not what I am.
So, Missy, do you get clients that come already diagnosed, and then you realize that isn't a diagnosis, and then you're like, okay, we need to change this?
Sometimes. Yeah. Most of my clients, I am getting them fresh. This is probably their first time in therapy, or they haven't been in therapy for a long time. So I'm diagnosing them. But other clients, yeah, they've been in therapy a long time. I'm just a new therapist for them. So they're coming in with diagnoses, and I'm just making sure that they're accurate. And so far, there hasn't been anyone who's been drastically different than what their diagnoses are. But I have a few who come in with like 4 diagnoses, and I'm like, all right, so what are we focusing on here?
Yeah.
And so we have to like reassess every few months anyways. So it's like, I will look at their chart and kind of reflect upon what we've worked on in session and how they've presented and stuff like that. And I will just check to see, okay, is there a better fit to maybe condense these diagnoses? Because there's nothing wrong with having multiple ones, because maybe they do have autism and PTSD and, something else. Fine. But are we having...
Where are we starting?
Yeah, but are we having bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, anxiety disorder, PTSD? Like, are all those getting listed? Like,
what level are we working here?
So that's kind of what happens. But there was something you were saying before.
I know. This is the hard part about our conversations. It's so much information, and it's so great.
Oh, the labeling.
Yes,
labeling. Even when I started therapy, my therapist, she told me, like, she's amazing, but she was what I needed in that moment, where there was so much concern about labeling myself at the time. And she's just like, you're dealing with these things. They don't define you. And she's like, let's just look at the facts. That's it. She would put the DSM in my hands and have me read and review each symptom. Does that sound like what you're dealing with? Does that sound like you? Like, yeah, it does. Like, a lot. Okay, so you're dealing with anxiety. You're dealing with this.
You don't have it.
Like, it's like you're dealing with it. You are not anxiety.
You're not,
right.
You are not trauma.
Yeah. So I have a story to share, and I might have shared this in the podcast before. I don't know. We have some episodes we don't end up posting, so I'm just going to share it again really quickly. But Emily is 6, and when she was 4 or 5, she went through this really like shy phase. Like, she was really shy. She didn't want to talk to anyone.
I remember you talking about this.
Oh yeah. So it was like when she was kind of when she was getting into kindergarten. Actually, that's exactly when she was very, very closed off, and we kept saying, like, Emily, don't be so sad.
you're so shy, or like when we're around my friends and
Labeling her.
yeah, and be like, oh, she's shy, sorry, like doesn't want to say hi, she's shy. Like this was happening for like months. And there was this one time that her and her dad went to this like jump off thing, and she was being shy, and it frustrated him. It got him really upset, and he called me, and he's like, or like she told me about it, and then he told me about it, and I was like, I think we should stop being mad at her for being shy. I think we should just let her be what she is and not tell her who she is, and just let's try that. And we did. And I told everyone in the family, the grandparents, aunts, we're not doing that anymore. She's shy, let her be shy. Don't label it, don't say anything. And we did now we don't do that anymore with that. And she is just not shy at all anymore. But like for a point, I'm like, wow, like the reflecting on it, I'm like, was she being shy because we were labeling? She thought she was shy.
Believing it.
Yeah. And that was a very powerful learning lesson as a parent for me, where I'm like, okay, let me not, you are, those terms I'm trying to stay back from, because I feel like
I told
toxic.
Fernanda, I was like, that's in that moment, that's who she was. I always told, don't stress it. Like in that moment, she's just figure, oh, Emily, go play with. And I was just like, just let her be. That's like, everyone is different.
Yeah.
There's so many different introverts, extroverts. Like there's people that have both. And so like, I was always like, Fernanda, it's fine. It's okay.
No, but
and
she's so shy.
People are just like, man, she's so, and I was like, just let her be. If she wants to be the quiet, like, is she being mean? That's a different, let's talk about that. But, like Fernanda was just like so worried, but she's not. The one thing I did tell Fernanda, and I, how like was trying to push Emily, was like, just to not allow people to step all over her.
Yeah.
You could be a child that is shy, right? Or that doesn't want to play with a whole bunch of kids, but we're not going to let people push you around. And I've always told her, like, my kid, he's tiny, but he's a leader. Like, he will tell people what to do.
Nathan.
He is not like, he right. It's like either my way or the highway. So then
push on mine.
Just like his mama.
So I mean, moving on. Anyways,
I do perfect. I'm gonna.
He looks a lot like his mama.
I'm gonna share something. I'm gonna share this because that was funny.
So like he was always like telling Emily what to do, and she was just like really quiet, and she's like, okay. And then I was like, Emily, if you don't want to do it, you could say no. Mm-hmm. You could do something else. And I was like, that's the one thing that if you want to work on her, you should work on her. Like, she should not let people tell her what to do just because she's like quiet. Mm-hmm. Right. And so
that
I was
goes
like,
for any kid though. Anybody. Like we're talking.
But I think that the kids that are more quiet, like they're more prone to be like, oh, maybe I'm just like, I don't know. I want to be like that.
But
everyone's
bullied.
different.
I think bully's a big thing for introverts.
Well, not necessarily the bullying part. It's just like allowing people just to kind of like direct
step all
it
over
for
you.
you, right?
Yeah.
Or just like, oh, we're gonna play hide and seek. You're gonna play hide and seek with me, but it's not like the bullying. It's just the telling them like, here's what you're gonna do.
It's kind of like me and you guys. When I tell you, we went through this the other day. Fernanda's like, everything has to be Dunny's way, and I'm learning now.
This was yesterday, guys.
Literally yesterday.
Missy, this was literally last night.
Because I have such a big personality. Like I have like when I want something, it's so passionate that I'm like, okay, guys, this is what we're doing. And
she's a leader. That's your problem.
Right. But
I'm a leader too.
I overstep.
Michelle's a leader too.
She's just entitled.
I'm just entitled.
We're all leaders. If we want to be
And
leaders.
I've noticed that they get mad at me now, but this is their fault too because they allowed me to be that way.
What?
Yes, 100%. And I'm gonna tell you why. And I'm gonna tell you why they allowed me to. Decorating, for example, right? It's a thing. It's my thing. I'm really passionate about it. I love it. It has to be my way. It has to be the perfect way. It can't be like 2 inches to the side. It has to be like in the middle, in the center. And everybody keeps saying, it's just how Dunny is. She'll figure it out. I've always heard, it's just how, just leave her alone. She got it. We'll be here to support her.
Yeah, okay, good.
We'll be here to support her, right? And now they're like, it always has to be your way. But y'all let it be my way all the time, and I'm used to it. Now I want it my way.
Decorating.
Right. I was going to say that too. We know how much you love it, so we give it you your space.
But then yesterday,
She's really good at it.
right, but then yesterday, they were like debating where the table was going to be, and I said, I don't think the table should be there. But now I think we're in such a relationship where they just don't want it to be my way anymore. No. And they were like, no, I think it has to be here, whatever. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever. Leave the table there. And then it's like, well, you get mad when it's not your way. And I'm like, I don't really know where to win with you guys.
So here's exactly what happened because she only knows one side of the story.
Oh,
The person that knows two sides of the story is right here. I'm always quiet. So what happened was,
Missy, I'm so sorry. I apologize in advance.
what happened was she wanted the table one way. She wanted the table the other way.
Names,
She was
'cause
just
people aren't.
Oh, sorry. Dunny wanted the table one way. Fernanda wanted the table one way. You know, I don't really care. So Jackie was just, I don't even know. Like you had a say, but not really. You was
I
just
wanted-
I wanted it.
So
the
it
way
was,
Dunny
but then
wants
it me and Jackie at the end, we were just like, whatever. As long as like we could see all the kids, we could sit wherever.
I wanted what I wanted,
So-
not what Dunny wanted.
But she's just there. No one.
well,
No,
I am
no one
the
listens.
most opinionated one. What do you mean?
Yeah, but we at this point we're like this.
We should talk about it, but not right now. Okay.
Yeah, right. So then these two started going back and forth, and then Dunny was like, Michelle, what do you think? And I was like, I don't really care. And then she's like, you always, I don't know what Fernanda has over you.
Oh, magic spell on Michelle.
Because I didn't take a side. And I was like, but you guys know me. I really don't
Right. She
care.
didn't even take a side, and you were saying she always takes my side. She
And-
just didn't take your side.
And then
I'm cutting Michelle off. You know why?
Are
All
you
I
into-
asked is, do you like pink or blue? I don't really care.
I like purple. Michelle, that's not
so
helpful.
back to what was actually happening in the moment, because we like to just go off. But it was just she wanted me to decide if I was going to take her side with the table being back there or Fernanda's side moving the table forward. I don't care. As long as there's chairs and I could see my kids. When it comes to layouts, I'm a anything goes as long as we're all comfortable and having fun.
Okay.
Decorating is not my thing.
Donnie's issue is that if it's not aesthetically pleasing, and this comes back to literally childhood, because she's been like this her whole life. Perfectionist. Okay.
Label.
What else? All right, sorry.
Controlling. No.
I make all the parties look good no matter
Right,
what.
But
appreciate you.
If it's not aesthetically pleasing, she's like, no.
It was aesthetically pleasing.
It wasn't though.
It was not.
That I have to agree.
It
She's
was
annoying,
not.
but it wasn't. It was like in the middle. We had this specifically. It was an L shaped. It's like a Jesus style table. We put it all together, and it was like an L. And so she wanted to put it in the middle of the salon, and we were like, no, there's like a little corner for it. Put it there.
Of the venue, by the way, salon is
hair
a
salon.
Portuguese
salon.
term.
Salon.
Salon is a Portuguese term.
So whatever the place, the
the venue.
Anyways, okay.
but.
So
Then-
moving on.
Right, because
I am
it's like-
perfectionist.
Right,
They're
but
right.
then Fernanda, this is another thing we need to work on. She thinks that because we're sisters, I take Dunny's side, and I'm like, I don't think that that's it, because I have a strong personality. I feel like I don't
Can't help it if I'm always right.
know.
It's not because you guys are sisters that I think that. It's just data. It's just the amount of times it happens is why I feel like that. And I could be wrong, and I
But
will
then
work
that's you
on.
labeling her not having her own opinion.
But that's not even what I say. I don't say. I don't
No,
think you
she
don't have your own
doesn't say
opinion.
that I don't. She knows I'm my own
Yeah.
self. She thinks that there's certain situations I side with you.
And is that true or false?
I think it's true, but to like your perception of it is like you're agreeing to her because you guys just hang out too much, and you guys.
Oh,
like,
that's not my
or-
perception.
Well, I think I'm gonna use my I
Thank you.
statement.
I feel.
I think it's fine too. I think I feel whatever. Sorry, Missy. She's like sitting here like I
gotta go.
I
No,
feel like that.
I'm here.
She got a life too,
She's
guys.
probably analyzing.
only 2 hours and 20 in.
Like, there's this building with 30 therapists, so I'm gonna talk to them so they can just all work together to help you guys out.
I think she's analyzing every single one of us right now, and she's gonna go home and.
No, I
Never again will I accept an invitation from these girls.
No.
in my graduate school.
I actually don't know anymore, Fernanda. I used to think I did. I don't think I know, but
You know, you can just ask.
right.
We don't have to right now, but we can. Just
No,
talk
yeah,
about
we'll do it after.
Anyways, well, I do think that we all label, right? That's a normal thing.
It's very normal
common.
to
It's
label.
normal to label.
I mean, I do this.
Okay, probably not.
Right,
No,
right.
I actually do this activity now again. with my training. I'm learning all these activities. And I asked people, okay, it's so funny. My daughter, poor girl. I'm like, so Emily.
She's the guinea pig.
She's the rat in the lab that we
Poor
use.
baby. No, I'm kidding. It's nothing crazy. I asked anyone, and I'm like, okay, so if I just met you today and I know nothing about you and I say, who are you? Hey, Emily, nice to meet you. Who are you? What would you tell me? Just to understand. What?
It's a good interview question, getting it ready.
That is. So who are you, Emily?
I'm not Emily, but what she answered.
continue
Oh,
your
okay.
conversation.
I'm like, I don't know what to say. No, yeah, she just answered. She's still young. She doesn't really. So then I think I asked like Jenny that. I just asked random people that because I'm curious to know how they identify themselves with. But it's a good way to kind of understand.
You're an analyzer, thinking about it.
I like understanding. I don't.
Yeah, I feel like you.
I analyze as I'm hearing things, and I'm like, sounds like that. But I'm doing better at like not really saying it out loud.
Keep it to yourself.
Right, I'm learning. But it is a cool, like, asking your husbands and, like, your family just to kind of hear what's important to them, really. Because when you're labeling yourself, like, what you're saying, like, for me, it's like, I'm Brazilian, I'm 28, I'm a single mother, I have a daughter. Like, these are things that, like,
multi-layered identities.
yeah, it's things that are important.
How can you tell the difference, though, Missy?
Between what?
But identifying, like, I am 28, I am Brazilian, I am a single mother. For, like, you example, I am 25, I am married, I have a kid. When do you know the difference that something that actually is, like, not...
It all technically is.
Yeah, right.
How do you tell the difference when you're labeled and now you believe that you are that?
Or if you actually
Or if you
are,
actually
and you're
are
just
that.
going with life,
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it just really comes down to, like, what identities do you most identify with? Like, what's important and relevant to you as a human being? Like, there's so many sociocultural identities out there, and most of them are on, like, a spectrum of
Right.
identity. So, yeah, I guess it really just depends on the person, like, what's important to you to be known as.
Right.
Most of the time I just function in life and pass as who I am, however that may be perceived by people. But in other certain settings, it might be important for me to maybe connect with people, and so I will share an identity with them
Right.
that I might not share with everyone. Like,
Yeah.
being Puerto Rican, I'm like, that's not.
You are Puerto Rican?
That's exactly why I don't bring it up. I don't bring it up.
There's a reaction. No. I would never.
That's why it
think
doesn't
that.
come up, because it's like, well, here's the same conversation.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't have to mean to have that reaction. Like, I would never.
But that's, yeah. So that will come up if I feel like, oh, this might be beneficial in this connection I'm making with someone. But if I'm just talking to someone, it might not come up.
So when you introduce yourself, you don't say, hi, I am Missy. I am, how old are you?
28.
28, and I'm Puerto Rican.
Yeah, no, I usually will not even
Mention
tell
it,
anyone
right?
about my ethnicity.
Isn't that cool though? Like once you start asking people who they are, everyone has different things.
Perspective.
Because if
Like-
you ask me, I'm Dunny, I'm 28 or 29.
29.
I'm Dunny, I'm 29, I'm Brazilian. But because I have such a pride thing with being Brazilian, that's who I am. And I hate it when somebody says to me, you're not Brazilian, you were born in Bridgeport. Wrong. My blood is Brazilian. Like for me.
Yeah.
And I got into my coworker the other day because he said to me, you're Portuguese. And I said, I'm not Portuguese. I am Brazilian. He's like, so why do you speak Portuguese? I said, because Brazilian
in
is
Brazil,
a
we speak
dialect.
Portuguese.
Right. Brazilian, the Brazilian
kind of
is a dialect, not because they keep saying like, you speak Brazilian. Brazilian isn't a
no.
language. It's a
Portugal.
dialect
Yo.
from Portugal. And it's like, I get so passionate about it because it's me, right? But now I get it. Like, it's not really a thing that you identify. You are Puerto Rican, but it's not something that you feel the need to share.
Yeah.
Do you
well,
speak
that's
Spanish?
I do, but I don't consider myself fluently bilingual because I struggle. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of say to that, like, again, Puerto Ricans are also very prideful, right? But as a person, I've always been la gringa, or the very white Puerto Rican in the family. And so that identity became less and less prideful for me over time.
Can I
And
speak on
that's
that?
sad, but also it is what it is.
I think
So
Brianna
you
can
think-
relate.
yeah.
the way people like perceived you.
They labeled me.
right.
So now you don't feel like you're Puerto Rican.
It's just like
I want to
Does
speak
that
on that.
affect you though? Like
it has affected me. Yeah.
really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I mean,
Go
and the
for
fact
Brianna.
that she doesn't identify.
no, I just wondered
completely.
to what extent because like Donnie is a very passionate,
So
you know, and she doesn't seem to be. So
speaking
passionate.
on what Missy just said, I completely relate to you, and I feel like that's kind of the impact it has on my family dynamic because I'm my Ferrari side of the family, my father's side of the family. We come from Italy, so I have the fair skin, I have the almost light eyes, the blonde hair. It's all so I've always been the
White
as
girl.
Dunny calls me for
I
many
used to. I
years.
stopped.
I know. Thank you
I'm
for stopping
respectful.
after the boundary was set.
Right.
But I drink Starbucks. I'm the white girl.
We all did it though.
Right.
No, we all did it.
No. I feel
We
like
all
Michelle.
called you the white girl.
Anyways,
Until you spoke up and said, hey, I
can
don't
y'all
like it.
stop?
Right.
Shit.
Because I'm more
Yeah.
I'm a little different when it comes to when I have any conversation with anybody else.
You gotta go closer. But anyways, it's crazy because I'm also very prideful of being Brazilian and I love being Brazilian, but I don't feel like I can be. I feel like I'm like allowed to
We
be.
made her insecure about
Yeah.
being Brazilian.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's literally what it comes down to. It did come down to an insecurity for me.
Yeah.
And
it's
my
sad.
ability to feel like I belonged in my family or like in Puerto Rican settings and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how it was. Obviously, you guys don't see it this way because in our family, it's a little different. But on my dad's side of the family, I'm the Fernanda. I'm the white girl. I don't understand what they feel because they're black. Their skin is darker than mine.
It's so weird.
So, so then it's like I have this identity crisis my entire life.
You don't know what you are.
I have this, right,
You
because
feel-
in Brazil, I'm considered white. Here, I'm considered a person of color. God forbid I say that to Brazilians. They're like, how dare you say you're someone of color? Like, you're white. You know what I mean? But then on my mom's side of the family, they consider me black because of my hair texture.
Yeah.
I think I would say.
So-
what are you is the question.
Yeah.
What do you consider
so
yourself?
right now, it's something I'm still figuring out because there isn't a term for me
yeah.
because I'm so mixed.
Bicultural.
Yes, the term is bicultural, but
We're talking. We're
in
talking race
Portuguese,
and color wise.
Bringing this back to
But when you are filling in paperwork, it's either you're white, you're black, you're Asian.
Yeah,
Like you
there's
have
that.
to check off one of
I
the
mean, you
boxes.
could put Hispanic because you are
But
Hispanic.
we're not considered
we're
Hispanic.
Latinos.
We're
Well,
Latinos. We're
Hispanic-
not considered.
They usually put the slash is what I meant.
But no, but that's another thing. I always get questioned, are you Hispanic? I don't know. Am I Hispanic? I don't know where it is.
I just
Latino.
check
Right,
off
yeah.
other. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I am. My birth certificate says
Yeah.
white. I don't,
Hispanic is if you speak
it depends
Spanish.
how I feel on that day. Either I'm putting African American and white, or I put
Yeah.
other.
I
Sometimes
put-
I put Indian because we have that too. At this point, I just
Your
don't
sentence
know.
is all messed up. Right?
It is
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
all over the place.
Can I just mention? So, this weekend I watched on Netflix the Meghan Markle and the Prince Harry TV Netflix series. Here you go. And in one of the episodes, I thought of you, Michelle, because she said, first of all, we're coming from, and this is in the royal setting, right? Just really quick so you guys get some background, but they're conservative, white, uptight. They have
Yeah.
a type of people to be in there, right? And so here comes this mixed race woman, like a bombshell. Dude falls in love. Let's get married. And so, like, she has to adjust with all of that, like, whiteness. And, I mean, forgive me my words. It might sound a little insensitive, but all that whiteness and royalness and, like, everything they've known. And so she gets the backlash because, like, they were tabloids saying, like, this mixed race woman, this ghetto woman, this black woman is coming into the royal family and ruining our bloodline because they're all white. And so I was watching that and I was like, dude, I'm not a person of color, and like I feel for people that are mixed race or are black.
You are a person of color.
Well, no, like I'm not.
I mean, unless
my
you don't want-
skin. No. My
In
skin
Brazil,
isn't
you're not
black. I'm
considered.
not
Here you are.
dark.
But
like
she,
I'm fair.
but she will not suffer the consequences, the labeling that that Meghan
I mean,
Markle
for God's sake,
would've.
my hair is Native American. Like, I have straight hair. So, like, even if I do, like, nobody will ever, they'll tell me, like, you're Puerto Rican. I've gotten Puerto Rican, Dominican, anything but, like, nobody's ever going to look at me and say, like, you're mixed race, you're black, right? Even though I could be. But my point is, this woman goes into this, you know, family and whatever, and she suffered so much bullying that on the TV, it comes back. She's like, I thought about ending my life because I didn't know how to deal with it. And their first son was born, and he was a mixed race. And so she got so much bully, so much so it's like she said on the show, I had this crisis of identity where I'm like, who the hell am I? Because they're defining me by my mixed race. And like, I don't know if I'm white. I don't know if I'm black. I don't know if I have enough color to speak upon black people issues. I don't know if I'm white enough to speak upon white people issues. So it's
That
like,
should definitely be an episode.
Yeah.
Because it your identity isn't your skin color. It's who you are, like,
but then again, this is
but
societal.
society labels, like, you're Puerto Rican or you're white or you're Brazilian, and that creates a
But it comes back to the
identity
mind.
issue.
and
Insecurity. I am insecure around Americans because I feel like I
I
don't.
think anyone who's not white feels
I-
that way.
I'm insecure because I'm
like
like, can I
saying.
even, like, my coworkers make fun of me all the time. He's like, you don't know who so and so is? That's not my culture. I don't know. Like, I don't have to know all this stuff. And they're like, it makes you feel a little.
I want to bring that up real quick because, and I want to let you speak because I know you have something to say. I can feel it. But I'm going to bring it back to therapy because another breakthrough moment in therapy that was a different therapist because I go to my therapist. So I was having an identity crisis at some point in my life after I had Emily. So it was probably a few years.
We talked about
4 years ago. And I go to her and I'm like, I just don't know who I am. Like, I'm like, at my job, I feel so stupid because I don't care about actors' names. I don't care. Is that person in the movie? Oh, the one with, don't care. Don't know who that is. Don't want to know. Honestly, it's not important to me.
Right, I don't give a
And so I go there and I'm like, I feel so dumb because I don't know any references. I don't know any of the pop culture in America. But then I also I don't feel comfortable in my Brazilian family because I can't go to my cousins and speak all comfortably and be all part of the crew and do the fun
dialect.
things. So I was like, I don't know who I am. And she's like, girl, you're just bicultural. You just have to learn two different things at the same time.
And that's why it's overwhelming.
Again, I was like, thank you so much because you're right, I am, and that is hard, and I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with not giving a fuck about actors' name, and I'm not okay with feeling out of place with my family, but like I can see why
You're
this is
working on
happening.
it though, right?
I can see why that's happening, and so that made me feel normal, which I love to feel. So go ahead.
No, yeah, it was just what Dunny was saying before too. Like, I don't even know what it was.
But when I said that I don't identify, like, with Americans.
Oh yeah. It reminded me of how and I've spoken about this before, and I say it so carefully, but because as a therapist, you know, we have to come from a place of non-bias and understand what inherent biases we carry so that they're not affecting our relationships with our clients. And I realized through grad school how much of an issue in crisis identity I was dealing with because I myself was still very uncomfortable around white people. And here I am, very white.
Labeled white.
Yeah, and I was so uncomfortable. And then if I was in a room with, I'm going to say people of color, but primarily black people, it was like a breath of fresh air. Like, okay, I could be myself.
Wow.
Because you felt welcomed.
Yeah, and it's because that's the culture I grew up around. So there was a
familiar.
It was a difference in, it's more so the cultural impact that I had growing up. So yeah, it still takes me some time to check my biases because, of course, I mean, we were talking about access. Majority of my clients, they're white.
You probably see that. I was going to say that you probably see a huge amount of that in therapy.
Yeah.
And people don't even know it, though.
Yeah. And you know, that's where it might come up here and there. And then again, if I get a person of color, that is where the connection, I'm like, okay, maybe this might be important for them to know that there's an added culture.
It goes back to being able to relate to your therapist.
Yeah.
It's like a little leverage you have there.
just
almost.
just a tiny bit, but it's more about just being able to say, hey, I grew up in Bridgeport as well. Or, oh yeah, my family's from the Caribbean too. You know, and just like, okay, yeah, I can understand that that thing that you're talking about.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily always color, it's circumstances.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna be a great episode that we should talk about.
Definitely bring Missy back.
But let's
wrap it.
Yeah, let's wrap it.
Michelle's taking notes.
We have to let her go.
This was
her life now.
This was
No, after we turn off, we're gonna
productive.
have a whole session. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
I don't care what your hourly rate, Missy. I'm gonna hit you up. I'm just kidding.
So thanks for being on, Missy. You were
Yes,
lovely.
Thank you for all the information. Thank you for
correcting us.
in the
We
right
need that.
places. Yes,
I'm
100%.
sorry you had to kind of sit there.
No, don't
Oh
apologize.
no, don't be sorry. I honestly was like waiting for the right moment to just interject in that way, because I'm like,
Therapist mode.
I'm like, I think I have this responsibility here. So how do I do that gently?
right.
You did a perfect job.
Yes.
So
We loved hearing from you. We loved
Yeah.
having you on the podcast.
I was so excited to be here.
I think we were more excited than you.
Can I make a confession?
Yeah.
I've been like mentally like these past like just being a mom and life and I was like, we're not getting along. I'm out of this podcast for. So
Jackie tried to quit, guys.
I
That's
did
why
let her.
she's been missing.
I did. So
Isn't that like one of the rules? You can't
We
leave.
can't
Yeah.
leave. So she's binded into the podcast.
she keeps trying to leave. We're like, girl,
I
okay,
break
but
the
you can't.
I break the rules, but essentially they pull me back.
Uh-huh.
And
Listeners.
then they try. You know what? I'm gonna snitch.
Listeners,
they tried.
we're gonna put an open response box in our stories, and anything you have to say to Jackie about her trying to leave, please
Hold her accountable.
your feelings.
No, but
They tried to record an episode on mental health, and they're like, well, Fernanda thought there was, and I'm sure there was some things.
there
that
was
were,
things that were valuable, but I do think that it was interesting to get her because she's very passionate about it. We all talk about it, but she's very passionate. We had a meeting yesterday, and I said we're gonna have Missy on, and I think you should be there. So she kind of is here
I
for you.
came back
She
for
might
you.
not come back for the next episode.
I'm honored.
I'm very inconsistent with my feelings, so I don't know how I'm gonna feel. I'm just kidding.
All right.
right,
But
well,
thank you for being here. Thank you. I mean, she
Thank you for having me.
I knew I was gonna cry, but like that was
You actually cried.
I couldn't breathe. I was like backing off the mic, and then I was like, Missy, don't say it because I'm gonna cry more. And then like when
responsibility.
when you said about like having it so funny that you have a partner, so that was solid. I don't feel that much alone anymore. I mean, I know there's people out there, but it's just not.
It's nice.
Welcome.
It's warm.
Nice to
It's
give
nice
that
of
welcome.
It's nice that like to get that welcome. Like it was warm hearing from you, like to relate experience. Because I was like hyperventilating at some point. I was like, oh my god, like how am I gonna? Because you get scared. How personal can I get on a podcast? And
Oh
then
yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to ask her as a, you're a professional above it all. I don't want to ask you questions that you're like, and feel free to like obviously not answer. But for me too, I'm like, how much am I exposing of my personal experience? And at this point, I'm like, you know what? I told my husband yesterday, I don't give a fuck. If I'm going back, I'm going back me. And
goes back to why we have this podcast because we
Right.
want to be raw. We want to be
this
honest.
is my
Yeah.
safe space.
I do appreciate you being honest
Yes,
and raw
yes, I
because I
loved
think
it.
that's a fresh air, and I think it's hard for people to do. And you just did it, without
Especially because
even-
you want to have that professional face of who I am professionally.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
And as a therapist, you want to seem like you're all put together and life is wonderful and there's nothing wrong with me because I'm great and I'm just going to teach you how to be great.
And that's the other part of it is that I want to teach my clients that no,
There's
We're
no,
all human.
there's no such thing.
none of us have it all together. Like it's impossible. Even well-adjusted Michelle.
Missy said it, not us.
I teach my students it's okay to make mistakes all the time. Just not to them because they just talk too much.
But yeah,
No,
all right.
Michelle.
Well, it's that self-empowerment again.
But I mean, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a great trait.
So don't block us. We will invite you again.
and if you guys want to continue following Missy on her
Yes.
journey, follow her on her Instagram. Is that cool, or do you not want that?
I have two
can remove that.
Instagrams. No,
Oh, yes.
well, I'll say them both.
Yeah.
My personal one, which I have to approve people because I don't want any clients following me, is at Missy dot Eve.
She made it hard to find too.
I needed I was like, is this the right one? And then my other one, I'm trying to build it again. I kind of let go of it, but it's so that I can turn it into more of a therapy focused Instagram account.
Yeah.
And it shares a lot of my art therapy reflections and stuff like that. So that one is MissyEve.art.
And I'll put all of those, or we'll put those in the show notes.
We'll put those up. Well, we'll put. Do you
And
want
on
your
social media.
Or I guess, do you want your personal one up on our social media? You don't
Really
care.
doesn't
I
matter.
just shared it. It's going up
Yeah.
now. She'll approve you guys if you guys are worthy.
Right.
Okay,
All right, guys. So thank you for listening.
Before we go, today is World Cup final.
Argentina won the World Cup 2020.
Did they really?
I am sweating.
It was 3-3.
And they went to penalties.
And Argentina has taken over. You know,
Congratulations.
Nope, not congratulating.
I hate it, but
Nope.
no, congratulations.
Whatever.
Messi, what a great
stopped
way
watching
to
the
end
day Brazil
your
lost.
soccer career. Congratulations, Ken. I have to give credit where it's due.
Right, Messi was great, Dunny.
As a proud Brazilian, I refuse to congratulate y'all.
All right.
Whatever. Never forget, be proud of who you are. You are not alone. It's just complicated. And the only way to bring change is to bring awareness. We'd love to hear from you and your thoughts on this episode. Feel free to reach out to us on Instagram at It's Just Complicated Podcast. Have a great, amazing day. We will see you soon.
Bye. Okay.